Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of the Snarp Fangle Podcast. I am your host, Jake Metzger, along with, ladies and gents, dear ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by the man who is my Bradley Cooper to your Jennifer Lawrence. Ladies and gents, David Reed. David, how are you doing today?
Excellent.
Fantastic. Welcome to episode 17 of the Snarp Fangle Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We are here, and we are loud, and we are proud to say we have made it to 17 episodes. David, this is a monumental moment of our podcast.
17. Sweet 17.
Sweet 17, yep. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
No, 1776 might have, but we're not here to talk about the colonial wars today, unfortunately. But, David, I want to actually start off by asking you a simple question. And this question pertains to kind of what we're going to talk about, but I just wanted to know, we're going to get a little biblical, ladies and gentlemen, to start off this. So, what has God done in your life this year, and what are you thankful to him for?
Well, I mean, he's done so much.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to pick one thing, but I guess I would say I'm most thankful that he's just continued to sustain me through these difficult and confusing times we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I was asked this question this morning, and I was kind of thinking, I'm like, what am I thankful for, and what has he done in my life to kind of really put into perspective? I mean, I'd probably say like just continual like provision, kind of like what you're talking about. I think God really, I'm going through my thoughts right now. I think he really has supplied me and kept me going, even though I may not have everything together, as they say. But I mean, nobody really has it together. Let's be real.
Yeah, no.
That's just how it is. And he's so graceful and merciful. But I want to ask you that because we're going to talk about two films today that deal with mental health. And I think it's important to remember that something that kind of helps with mental health and with your brain, let's say, is to, number one, praise God and worship. Get your mind off the things of the world and focus on him. And number two, being thankful. Being grateful for what you have. Because when you kind of put your mindset into a grateful mentality and you actually speak out words out loud, like if you were out praying out loud, for example, then I would say, I mean, I think it's medically proven too that your mind, when it starts focusing on that and it starts being thankful and there's gratitude, there's an instant change in the mindset. And as a result, a change in your mental health and a betterment of your body and your mental image. So, David, for those who aren't aware, if you've made it into 17 episodes, we are here to talk about the Snarp Fangles of the days. And so I kind of wanted to start with that because we're going to talk about two films specifically that deal with mental health. And David, this was actually your idea. And we're like, oh, hey, let's, I think it'd be cool to watch that movie. And I'm like, oh, yeah, how about I bring a movie in too and we'll do that. That sounds pretty cool. And then as we were watching them, back to back, like one day one movie, one day the next, it kind of came to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is kind of, these two films are a lot more similar than we could actually imagine. So, David, I want you to explain what we're here to do and what we're about to start doing.
All right, so basically, we are here to kind of discuss a couple of movies that have kind of fly under most people's radars, one more than the other, but the first one doesn't fly under the radar as much, but it's kind of surprising that it does to me, to the degree that it does. And the other one really, really flies under people's radar. And so we want to kind of talk about these movies, bring them to the wide audience of Snarp Fangle.
Yes. And those two films are, number one, Shutter Island from 2010, and number two, Stay from 2005. So I'm going to start off. So Shutter Island, famous movie, I would say, the classic from 2010. It's directed by Martin Scorsese, written by Lata God, man, this name. Leota Kalogridis, Greedy, and which was the screenplay adapted by the novel written by Dennis Lehane. I will want to mention it was edited by Thelma Schoonmaker. We'll mention her later. Starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Mark Ruffalo, Ben Kingsley, and the dude that freaking looks a lot like Christopher Plummer, Max von Sydow, as well as Michelle Williams. So basically, this film, for those who aren't aware, here's the description from IMDb. It says Teddy Daniels and Chuck Eel, two U.S. Marshals, are sent to an asylum on a remote island in order to investigate the disappearance of a patient, where Teddy uncovers a shocking truth about the place. So I've never seen this film. So I was going into this pretty much blind. I remember early when it was coming out, I remember seeing the trailers. I'm like, ooh, it looked creepy and scary. And ooh, man, I remember seeing posters and people talking about it, but never really cared for it. Never really wanted to do it. But then I was going through Martin Scorsese's actually filmography earlier this year, which was awesome to do. And this is one I've yet to get. So, David, I want to know your history with Shutter Island, and what do you think of this film? Just as we're diving into it.
So Shutter Island was a movie that I watched shortly after it came out, if I remember correctly. I didn't watch it in theaters, but very shortly after it came out on home video, I watched it with some buddies of mine one night on Netflix, back when Netflix had much better selection than it does now.
Which is something we are going to get into later on, ladies and gentlemen. But continue.
Yeah, so I remember just being utterly awestruck by the movie, just how well it was done, the twist at the end, the pacing, the thrills, the music, the dialogue. It's all so great. And then I kind of promptly sort of forgot about it for many years after that. And then for some reason, when Jake and I were talking, this movie came to mind. And it's like, man, Shutter Island, have you seen it? And then it just started, it kind of kicked off this whole conversation that led to the idea for this episode.
Yeah, and I do want to say before we go any further that we will be talking about spoilers, but later on in the discussion, and you will be prompted by us when we dive into that. So, and also on YouTube, it will be bookmarked where the spoilers start and end for each of the selected movies. So, yeah, I remember we were talking. I'm like, oh, what do you want to do for this week for the podcast? And you're like, oh, you know what, this and this, and then you brought up Shutter Island. And I was like, oh, that'd be awesome. And I'm like, well, what's a movie we could also talk about? I guess that kind of would fit into that, like your idea was a more well-known movie and a not so well-known movie. So Shutter Island was your pick. And I remember we sat down and watched this just a few days ago. And I got to say, I was very, very impressed. I was like kind of blown away, in fact, just from the talent on display from both the actors and the directing, especially the editing as well. And what I will say as well, is that this movie really messes with your mind. And in a really fun way, I would say, and also subverts expectations. But also, if you're kind of overanalyzing it, you kind of think it's going to go into the original direction that it's presented, but that's not the case. Well, we'll dive into that later. But one thing I do want to talk about is the editing, so I'm going to dive into that here. I wrote some stuff down here. It says, I wrote down here, the editing is interesting. There's a scene where we are introduced to Ben Kingsley's character, Dr. Cowley. In this scene, there's a moment where the detectives and the doctor are discussing a patient, and in the cut, there's a moment where the camera cuts between Leo, Mark, and Ben. The camera then shows Mark Ruffalo asking a question, cuts the doctor, and in this shot of the doctor, it shows Leo, like off to the side, looking away from him as he responds to Mark's question. And then it cuts to Leo, like a perspective, like on this other side of Ben Kingsley's head. It cuts to Leo, and Leo's looking directly at Ben Kingsley's character. So there are a few things I want to say about this because it's really interesting. It's weird, but very effective. And it kind of sort of compromises continuity, but it's so well paced as well as the dialogue is paced well, and it's kind of a culmination of really well done dialogue, excellent editing, but also it's like it's done with it in a way that makes your mind pay attention and question what you're looking at. And I love it, David. I want to know what you think about this editing. Man.
Yeah, the editing of the movie is quite interesting. One part that stuck out to me was when Leo's character gets picked up by, I believe he's like the head of security or the captain of the guard or whatever on the island, and his what's that actor's name? Ted Levine?
He comes in later, but the other guy we're introduced to at first is a different guy, different actor.
Okay. Yeah, I'm talking about
the first guy we meet.
No, not the first guy. The
warden.
The
warden who gives him a ride.
Yeah, the warden who gives him a ride. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. So, because prior to this, Leonardo's character is out in the wilderness.
Out in the wilderness.
He's discovered some things.
He's living with the wolves, man.
Yeah, he's discovered some things, and he's wandering out in the wilderness on this island, and he gets picked up by this warden played by Ted Levine, and it goes from a very realistic sort of well done shot and cuts straight to a vehicle ride that's obviously them just sitting stationary in front of a green screen. And then you have Ted Levine's character talking about some very interesting things, and it's almost like this, like a weird trippy dream sequence, but it's like if you're not paying attention to the editing, it doesn't necessarily register as a dream sequence.
Yeah, I think this is probably my favorite scene of the film, where you're following what's his name, Teddy? Yeah, you're following Teddy, and he's picked up by good old Ted Devine, actually, not
Devine.
Devine.
Oh, okay.
Who, I know him from the Monk series with Tony Shalhoub. He was Stottlemyre, the chieftain. As well, he was in the first Fast and Furious. He's an amazing character actor, great guy. I don't think I've ever seen him completely clean shaven. They always give him that dang mustache as a cop. But no, they were like, no, you're just going to clean as clean can be. And he looks creepy without that mustache. He looks weird. So I remember seeing him pick it up. I'm like, oh my God, it's Ted Devine. And then as we proceed through the scene, David, and the abysmal green screen effect. Like literally, they're driving down the forest, right, on the island, and like the background's going by them, and no difference in shading or lighting is happening to their faces. It's all super stationary. There are some reflections on the warden's cap, in the plastic of his cap, but that's about it. Like there's nothing else. It's like if I would have to critique this movie, some of the like special effects are kind of but I don't really want to focus on that but it does take you out of the scene. But
I think it's intentional.
Really?
I think it's intentional.
It's intentional
because it's Martin Scorsese we're talking about.
Yeah.
And while there's certain parts in the film that are like a little questionable, shall we say, there's none that are quite so egregious as this. Because like even the parts where you can tell it's like, green screen or like a matte painting in the background, it's a little more seamless, a little more believable in other scenes. But this one is just a jarring cut from a very realistic wide angle shot of a forest to just like a close up of two guys obviously sitting stationary in front of a green screen with absolutely no work done to hide the fact that they're in front of a green screen. It's like in my mind, it has to be intentional because, like I said before, I think it's supposed to represent a kind of like almost like a dream sequence.
And I can also imagine that with the way, I mean, I'm not a director, I'm not a movie maker, But however, I can imagine that it was probably a lot easier to film this than it would actually be in the forest, like to film the sequence. So I totally understand why they're doing it and everything. Like you can imagine the guys in the studio like rocking the Jeep back and forth as they're talking and stuff like that, to create the effect, which is cool. And it's also like an older effect too, which kind of gives you callback because, Martin Scorsese is a lover of cinema and he loves to, do stuff like that. Also, it's just smart looking at the way the production is. Like, hey, this is just a scene that we don't have to spend a whole lot of money on. We can just do it in here. And then we can have the actors focus and not have them be distracted by the environment they're in and just focus on that. And Ted Devine and Leo are just such amazing actors that they can just pull it off regardless. So you also have that as your benefit. But the scene, dude, I love the monologue that Ted Devine gives. I love the back and forth because and the refusal of Teddy's character to embrace the message that the warden is giving to him. And it's just, it's like talking to the devil and like a conversation with Satan. And it's like, it's basically like trying to get him to give into his inner demons or his inner like wants and faults. And it's just really beautifully written and delivered, and it's awesome. God, I love the scene so much. It's probably the best scene in the film. It's funny how we jumped to it right away. But I also want to talk about Leo's character just a little bit here because you have this guy who's like, he has all this weight and dynamics that are put upon him. And they're perfectly told to us at the right time. And some would probably say that they're delivered to us through exposition dumps at some point by him and by Mark Ruffalo's character, who's his martial partner. But these expedition dumps are, I would say, realistic. And the writing is smart in the way it handles it, too. The fact that he's having PSD from his experience in World War II, the atrocities he's seen on duty, his dead wife, his aspirations for finding the arsonist who's responsible for his wife's passing. All this taken into account, he's now on an island where he has to come face to face with his, like literally his own demons, as well as stare into the souls of those that have succumbed to their own. People who could be natural mirror images of possible outcomes of where his mind is headed. And like in the opening, like on the opening of the movie, he's on the ship, he's got seasickness, he's in the bathroom throwing up, and then he goes out to Mark Ruffalo's character and they just talk and kind of get to know each other because they don't know each other going into this situation and the reason why they're going to the island. What did you think of Mark Ruffalo in this film and Leo's character going the back and forth in their relationship?
Mark Ruffalo, yeah, I think he was a perfect foil to Leo. They really sort of, even though the characters don't actually like know each other in the beginning of the movie, they have incredible like on-screen chemistry, and the way they work together and kind of go back and forth. It's I really enjoyed that dynamic of it.
And this, I could be wrong. This is the second film Scorsese and Leo did together at this point. Because they did The Aviator, which was, I don't remember what year that was, but I can't remember if he did another one with Leo before this. I don't know. Or if this is the second one, because you have The Aviator, which is a fine movie. You have Shutter Island, and then you have Wolf of Wall Street, I believe. I could be wrong on that one. But him and Scorsese are awesome together. Like with this, with Wolf. God, I love Wolf of Wall Street so much. Have you seen that, David, at all?
No, I have not.
Oh man, it's for the audience out there. It's one of the like most well-earned rated R movies I've probably ever seen in terms of content. But it is one of the most entertaining films I think I've ever seen in my life. Just at the pacing, the editing. I believe Thelma Schoonmaker as well as Scorsese team up again for that film. They always collaborate together. And Leo just brings like everything. He's just so incredibly talented, as well as Jonah Hill and Margot Robbie and all these kind of people. So, and it's like, I won't talk about it anymore. We're here to talk about Shutter Island, but I just love Wolf of Wall Street. Maybe we'll talk about that again one day.
So actually, just to
clear the air. So this, so you have, this is, Shutter Island is actually the third
a series of 3 films with DiCaprio. So you have 2004, The Aviator, 2006, The Departed.
Oh, The Departed.
And then Shutter Island in 2010. And the movie before The Aviator was Gangs of New York, but that was Daniel Day-Lewis, right?
Yes.
Oh, no. It does have Daniel Day-Lewis, but it also has Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, okay.
So this is
like technically the 4th film.
This is quite the streak.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look through like Scorsese's filmography, I don't know how much have you seen of his filmography, David, but I mean, pretty much every single one's pretty dang good film.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I've seen the majority of his films, but I've seen a few of them, and I've seen bits and pieces of Taxi Driver. I've seen bits and pieces of Goodfellas. Then I've seen Gangs of New York, Aviator, Departed, Shutter Island. I think that is about it.
Yeah. I remember watching Raging Bull earlier this year, and it was a very sad film to watch, but it was very good. Very, very excellent, I would say. But also, I watched, I think it was chronologically his film after. No. He did Temptation of Christ after that, I think, which I didn't want to watch. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But which looks fine, but not my thing. And then I go to After Hours, which is his film right after that. And I kind of told you this while we were watching it, David. But in this After Hours, Scorsese does a funny thing, especially when he's paired up with his all-time collaborator, Thelma. Like, there's a shot in Shutter Island that is kind of unnecessary, where it's a dolly zoom, and like the camera's coming in and the camera's zooming out. That's what that means, dolly zoom. And like, it's going onto this person's face, and you're like, whoa, okay. And then like it just cuts, and you're like, whoa, that was kind of cool, like an effect, you know? And the same thing happens in After Hours, which is a very, very I would say more unknown film from Scorsese, which is excellent, by the way. But there's this scene where this guy and this girl in an apartment, they're talking, and he's sitting on the bed and she's about to leave the room, and they're having this discussion about death and dealing with life. And then he says something like profound to her, and then like it cuts to her and it does the dolly zoom, and it's really like wind's blowing behind her hair, there's stuff flying, and then like it goes up to her, and then boom, it cuts right back to her in a normal shot, like, yeah, you're right. And I'm like, wait, what? It was just such a random use of that effect. But
speaking of really, really jarring edits,
yeah,
there's one thing I want to talk about, and that's, oh my God, Socrates!
Oh my God, Socrates! Okay, so the editing, as we've already established, is very strange and messes with your mind in this film. Very intentional, by the way. But holy crap, what's with Socrates' statue right there? Why, David? Why? When we were watching this, it was like a very intense like interrogation scene. And then like it cuts to like wind blowing in this empty room and with leaves flying around, and then just a statue of Socrates, like a chimeric statue, is just sitting there. And then it cuts to a close up of it, and you're like, what? I'm like, oh my God, Socrates!
And it's like it cuts to like a close up of this bust of Socrates, like was it a full statue or was it just a bust?
It was just a bust.
Yeah, this bust of Socrates, like right as this like huge flash of lightning and thunderclap, and it's just like bam, right in your face.
It was so random. Now I'm sure if I go and find out like stuff about the writing and the story and analysis of this film, we know why Socrates, I'm sure, is in this film. But I don't have that acquired knowledge right now, David. So right now it's just, oh my God, Socrates!
I have that reaction though. You kind of broke me there with that reaction.
Yeah, I broke David. He couldn't breathe
because
like 2 minutes.
It was good. It's like, I mean, it was a jarring cut for sure, but it didn't freak me out in the same way it did you. So
I was like, oh my God, Socrates, like just a visceral reaction to what it was on screen. Not the blood, not the cuts that you see in this film, not the grotesque imagery, just, oh my God, Socrates, you know? So from there, I kind of want to jump back into kind of earlier in the film where we're introduced to Ben Kingsley's character, who's the doctor of the island. And he's kind of running the operations here. He really this film very much reminded me of the Batman Arkham games, especially the first one where it takes place in Arkham Asylum. And I just couldn't help but my nerd mind go to like that place where I'm like, God, if this was like in the form of Arkham Island or something, like that would be freaking such a nerdy, a crazy kind of thing, which this is obviously not, so don't worry, guys. But I'm like, what if, man? What if they gave, what if Leonardo DiCaprio starred as like a marshal going to Arkham Island or something? And I'm like, oh my God, that'd be so dope. Like, it just gave me that image. I'm like, dude, like, because this is an insane asylum we're in. And it's like different facilities, different areas, doctors that are kind of sketch and weird and really creepy. It's so convincing. That's what's something I love about this film. It sets up perfectly, like, especially the intro shot of the island. Like, you're here, you're ready to go. And then it dives into, as we go along with the story, it dives into like the weird guard character, then the warden later on. We have Ben Kingsley's character. We have what's his name? Max von Schnow or whatever his name is. That guy who's like the Christopher Plummer lookalike. And I'm like, oh my God, Christopher Plummer's in this film. You're like, yeah, he is. Like, as I'm writing the details, I'm like, oh, it's not Christopher Plummer. Is he a long lost twin? So you know Force Awakens, David? You know the intro where Oscar Isaac's talking to that old guy? Mm-hmm. That's this actor. That's this guy who plays this.
Oh,
doctor
you're right.
guy.
It is.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my God, like what the heck? This guy looks just like Christopher Plummer. He's the Costco version of Christopher Plummer. Like
he's the great value.
The great value Christopher Plummer. I mean, he's great. He's a great actor.
Yeah, he does a really, really good job.
Yeah, he does fantastic work in this, as well as Ben Kingsley. But Ben Kingsley's like pretty much great. Everything is in. Even in some of the films that aren't so great, he does bring his A game to it. Except for that one shot in as well as in 2010, the classic David Prince of Persia movie with Ben Kingsley as the bad guy.
No.
And there's a scene where he's walking into this assassin like cave, or no, like building, and like it's so bad. It shows Ben Kingsley. He's like observing all these like master assassins practicing their moves and their gadgets and all that. And then there's this thing where it shoots spikes and darts out of this like gauntlet thing, and it shoots. The guy shoots it, and then Ben Kingsley's like, oh, and it cuts to his face like a really like bizarre and awkward stare, like, oh, and then he just backs away, and the darts hit the wall. It's like the worst acting I've ever seen from him. But that's another film that we're not here to focus on. Anyway.
Oh, man.
But yeah, that's not Christopher Plummer, guys. It's not.
Sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
Bad news, y'all. Yeah. One thing I do want to bring up, this film, especially with the acting in particular and the writing and the pacing, reminded me a lot of like a middle 20th century film. Like in terms of when this film could have been made. Like it felt like it was a script, maybe taking the language out, but it felt like a script that was from that time that was meant to be portrayed by theater actors. It felt like very much like a 50s, 40s film, maybe even 60s, where the dialogue's fast, you're getting to the point, you're figuring it out, although it's much more comprehensible and it's in this modern lens. And it's really cool because this does take place in the 50s as well. So it feels very much of that era, especially in the acting and the writing and the prowess on screen. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's all portrayed very convincingly. One thing that jumped out at me when we watched this a couple days ago, that I hadn't really thought about before is how convincing DiCaprio's accent is in this movie.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's very much like 50s, like New York kind or Boston, like hard-boiled cop detective kind of character.
To be fair, he has had like 2 or 3 films with just with Scorsese, where he kind of has to fall into that accent as well, I would say. I haven't seen The Departed or Gangs of New York. I do want to watch those films, but I will say, like, he's been a New Yorker many a time, quite a few times. But I don't know, Leo's just such a great actor in general that, I mean, he could pull pretty much anything off. Have you seen Catch Me If You Can, David? With Tom Hanks?
No.
Ooh. I never finished it, but it's a pretty good film, pretty good stuff. So, but yeah, he's got a great accent. I think Mark Ruffalo's a perfect like tin foil for him to grasp onto, especially when they're going through back and forth in many different scenes. Ben Kingsley's like straight up, just he's evil, or something's messed up with this guy, because it's like, if you're the head of an insane asylum, pretty much in every form of media and real life, it's always bad news bears, man, no matter what you do. So your mind immediately goes there. Something that did remind me of, David, is it reminds me of this film called A Cure for Wellness by Gore Verbinski. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's pretty much, it's not a Shutter Island ripoff, but it very much is like this film. I haven't seen A Cure for Wellness. It's been on like my to watch for many a time. It's got like Dane DeHaan in it. It takes place in this insane asylum. And it's like supposed to be a very creepy horror movie that's very, very messed up. But it reminded me a lot of that, especially just like even the same coloring and the same kind of tones that are in this film and the filmmaking, I would say. But yeah, Cure for Wellness, I need to check that out. Gore Brzezinski's a great director, by the way. Let's see. Also, this is straight up a Twilight Zone episode. 100%. Like, just like even before we get to the ending, which I thought of this like as we're watching, I'm like, this is basically like a Twilight Zone episode, except it would probably end with him being like dragged to a room in an insane asylum, and that's how it would end, versus what we do get in the ending. But yeah, oh my God, Socrates. I wrote down here, the editing continues to play with your mind. It is obvious that it is intentional the way Thelma is cutting things together if you're paying attention. David, I want to talk about that interrogation scene with that lady that Ruffalo and Leo do. You know what I'm talking about? The one with the glass that's not in her hand. You might explain to the audience what that scene is and what we noticed when you were watching it.
Yeah, so there's this scene where Mark Ruffalo and DiCaprio are sitting down to interrogate the patients of this asylum because they're asking questions about a particular patient who seemed to have escaped. And so they're just trying to gather information. And we get to one character who they're interrogating, and she seems very nervous, shall we say, and she asked for a glass of water, and so Mark Ruffalo gets up to get her a glass of water, and he comes back, he sets it down on the table, and now that I think about it too, was there any water in the glass?
I think so, yeah.
You think there? Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
I couldn't quite tell if there's water in the glass, but my confusion on this will make more sense as I explain the scene. So you see the table, and then you see Mark Ruffalo's hand come in with the glass and set it down. And then it cuts to, and then you see her pick it up with, it was her left hand, right? Or was it her right?
She picks it up with her right hand. Yes.
Yeah. She picks it up with her right hand.
Yep.
And then it cuts to her face, and she's drinking.
She's bringing it to her face and drinking it, yeah.
But she's doing it with her left hand, and there's nothing in her hand. And then she sets the glass down.
With her left hand. And we had to rewind that. I'm like, wait, what? She put it down with her left hand. And then we rewound it, and then we caught that she's not holding anything. She's just drinking nothing. And it was like so quick and so like fast. We're like, what the heck? This is crazy, man. But there's tons of little cuts like that through this whole film that are making you, it's 100% intentional. It's making you question your mind of what you're actually seeing because you're in an insane asylum, because of Leonardo DiCaprio's character getting PSD as he's here and just trying to figure out this case that they're on, and it's just really, really well done. And I want to point out another scene where they're kind of, I think it's after this, they're exploring the forest, kind of meandering and looking for the late missing patient. And they find, and the storm's really bad. Like there's a big storm coming in on the island. They can't leave. They were supposed to leave that day. And so they're bunkered down in this not church, but it's kind of like a
mausoleum.
A mausoleum.
You're talking about the cemetery scene, right?
Cemetery scene.
Yeah. So they're inside of a mausoleum to get shelter from the storm.
Yeah, and they're in there, and this is a big exposition dump at this point. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's exposition dump, but the actors are really great, and the dialogue's just fitting great as well. That it doesn't matter if this is an expedition dump. It's entertaining. It gets you more thinking about what's going on and what's next, as well as figuring out the mystery. So, I think exposition is. A lot of people give it crap, like you can't when you're writing use an exposition scene and stuff like that. But
show not tell, which is a good rule to follow.
Good rule, totally.
But in this case,
it's a tool. Exposition is a tool. You got to use it effectively, kind of like with a lot of tools of writing. So in this scene, it's like the storm, and also the storm I noticed in the scene is getting louder and louder in the background as they're talking and they're figuring out stuff. And they're like, well, what if the government's after you, man? Like Ruffalo's talking to Leo, and he's like, what if the government's after you, man? And they're making you come here, and they're gonna capture you, man. They found you out. Because Leo has alternative motives while he's here. And so Mark Ruffalo's kind of playing to that. And it's just really interesting to see. And then just randomly, in a very Evil Dead moment, the doors burst wide open on the mausoleum. And they're like, what? And this wind and rain and snow and leaves come into the thing. And then like the cops or whatever find them or the guard from the earlier finds him. And they're like, what are you guys doing out here? Get the hell in this vehicle. And it's like very much like, yeah, we can't trust anybody while we're here.
It's a very effective scene too, because like, sure, it's just exposition, but the way it's delivered builds tension. All of a sudden, this door just bursts wide open, and this dude's just like, get out of the car! What are you guys doing? And it's just like, it totally like, it's like, whoa! Okay, that's a weird way to break tension.
Yeah.
I also wanted to mention in that scene, Mark Ruffalo's line that he delivers is so great. Where he's like, he's feeding into DiCaprio's fears, and he's like, what if while you were looking into them, they were looking into you? It's really good.
Yeah,
it's so good.
Like Mark Ruffalo, he's mostly known for like romantic comedies as well as the Marvel movies nowadays, but he's a great actor, man. And wait, is he in The Departed as well? I'm gonna have to look that up. Let's see. I don't think he is, but I would say he's a great actor. I love Mark Ruffalo. Love me some Mark Ruffalo. He's fan flippin-tastic.
Mark Ruffalo.
It doesn't seem like he's in. I need to see this film. Martin Sheen's in this movie. Anthony Anderson. Oh, David, we got to watch The Departed next. Anthony Anderson, man, you got to watch it if Anthony Anderson's in it. I mean. You also have.
I know I've seen this movie before.
You also have Jack Nicholson, which is fine.
Yeah, I know I've seen. Well, I know I've seen this movie before, but I actually don't remember it.
Yeah, I'm curious.
So yeah, we will have to watch this again at some point. This is a star-studded cast.
Oh yeah, everybody's
Leo, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Mark Wahlberg, Martin Sheen, Ray Winstone, Alec Baldwin.
Jeez, and of course Anthony Anderson.
Oh, and you have another Wahlberg. You got Robert Wahlberg.
Oh no, Robert Wahlberg.
You've got the Great Value Wahlberg.
Great Value Wahlberg. Wait, oh, man, how many? That's a lot of Wahlbergs, man. Jeez, hard to keep track of them. All right, let's get back to the thing at hand. After this scene, they kind of are brought into the facilities. They're kind of, oh, your clothes are wet. Well. No worries. Here are some inmate costumes.
They're orderly uniforms.
Orderly uniforms like we wear to take care of the patients. So you can wear these while your clothes are dry. They'll be ready tomorrow morning.
And then, of course, they're, your cigarettes were soaked, but Here, I got you. Here's
I got some lucky strikes right here for you. You know.
Well, he doesn't.
He doesn't say lucky strikes, but
he basically he's basically like, oh man, your cigarettes, they were
soaked, man.
all soaked. But and then he holds up. There's a pack of cigarettes on top of the clothes, and he's just got this like air of, don't worry, man, I got you.
All right. Well, David, let's jump into the breakout scene, which happens the following. Oh no! Let's jump into the what's it called? The dream sequence. The dream sequence that follows after this, where DiCaprio is dreaming of his wife who's dead. Stuff's happening. I don't remember the full details. Do you remember the full details of what happens? Does it start in World War II, or does it start with him talking to his wife? There's a couple of flashback or dream sequences in this film.
Some of the dream sequences kind of blend into each other because they all use very similar imagery.
Mm-hmm.
So you have.
Let's talk about the first one with DiCaprio and his wife. Let's do that first.
So the first one, I believe, I don't think you see any World War II flashbacks. In this one, I think it's DiCaprio talking to his wife, and his wife is dead in the movie. So he's dreaming about her, and basically she's urging him forward on his mission that he has in going to the island, which is not actually about the job at hand, but he has a different mission entirely. So yeah, he's talking to his wife, and she's urging him on his mission, and you see they're inside their
house,
Yeah. They're inside their New York apartment.
Yeah.
But you see outside the window, you see the back of the lake house that they moved to later. And also very, very interesting use of foreshadowing is in every scene where DiCaprio is talking to his wife in a dream, she's always wet.
Yeah. And she is as well in this scene. And I gotta say, the performance with Michelle Williams, who plays his wife, and Leo is just great. Like, they just give it their all. You're like, oh my God, these people like freaking love each other, and they're husband and wife. They've been together forever, and they miss each other, man. They love each other. It's so sad. It makes you cry. And then like she like at the end of that scene, she's burning up, and she descends into ash, you know. And you're like, oh my God, she died of a fire. This is terrible.
Yeah.
So
that was one of the parts though where the special effects kind of like took me out of the scene a little
really?
bit.
Okay.
Where she kind of just like bursts into a cloud of ash, and all of a sudden the room is on fire all around him. Like, that was a little cheesy.
A little cheesy. You know, there's a touch of cheese there, you know.
I mean, it's not bad, but it was a little cheesy.
Yeah, you get the emotion, but it takes you out a little bit, you know.
Yeah, so it's moments like that make me think the sequence with Ted Devine was intentional in the way how bad it was, because like that scene where his wife bursts into ash and then the room starts burning is bad, but it's not like really, really bad. It's just a little bad.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah.
But then that scene in the Jeep with Ted Devine is like, oh my God.
God, that green screen. Jeez, man. What is wrong with you people?
So, yeah.
So, and then there's the second dream sequence where I think it starts in World War II, where he is...
he's liberating Dachau, the concentration
camp. And it's a really amazing one shot where the soldiers are walking, these German soldiers and facility attendants, across the fence and everything. And you know what's going to happen. They're probably going to kill him or keep him from prisoner. And then like one guy moves out of the way. One guy accidentally shoots him, and then just it's a bloodbath. They just murder all these German guys in this concentration camp, being the liberating army. And it's this one shot where it goes behind the fence, and it's just carnage. They're just obliterating all these guys and shooting them up. And it goes on for like 20 seconds. It's a long shot.
It's weird how the scene, that shot goes on way longer than you expect it to.
Like I'm like, oh, probably 5-7 seconds. No, it keeps going.
Yeah, it's like that's a lot of dead SS officers.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just goes to show, like, I think the prowess that Scorsese has in his talent of directing. And also, like, I think he was 60 something when he did this, so like he's not a spry chicken, and he still isn't, you know. But it goes to show just how he keeps the freshness alive in all of his films, which is really nice. After that, Leonardo wakes up. He talks to his wife again, I believe at the lake house or back in a different or in the concentration camp or something like that. But yeah, he's got PTSD from seeing all these dead people in the concentration camp, killing the soldiers, being part of war. Really bad stuff. You know, he's messed up in the head, you know. And his wife died. Now he's even more messed up. And so he's kind of like, and this island is not the ideal scenario for him. So it's just like a perfect storm as we go through it. And it makes me want to read the novel too, because this was a novel originally. And so, but yeah, it makes me want to read that. But anyway, so he wakes up all wet. And you're like, he's like, why is he all wet? Oh, it's storming outside. There's a leak on him. Okay, that's probably why. Okay, no worries. All right, gotcha. And then they wake up again in the morning, and it's like chaos. The storm blew down the power lines and turned off the generators, and inmates are running around wild. And they're like, arr! And then all the couriers are like trying to catch them and all this stuff. And then they're like, well, They're saying, well, and so Mark and Leo are looking at this and they're like, whoa, like, this is crazy. Yeah, we're not going to do anything right now but watch them catch these people. You know, we're just going to keep talking right now. So then they see the other facility that they have been forbidden since they got there to ever enter. And so since the power's down, they said, hey, there ain't no guards, ain't no cards to access the place. Let's go in there. And so they go in there, and this whole sequence, it's a thing of beauty, David. It's like it was not only great to watch, but it's like serves so many purposes, and it's awesome. And they go in there, and the guard finds them, and he's like, "Careful, these effers will kill you." Because this is like lockdown scenario. This is isolate. This is solitary confinement, man. These guys are messed up. They're all serial killers. You're not supposed to be in here. He's like, "Yeah, these effers will kill you." And then literally, it's like all scary and foreboding, and they go and they open this like creak open a cage door down this long hall at the end of this long hallway, and then like as they're looking at it like, you know, zung, this guy pops out. Oh no! And then he's like, ah, and they back away, and then he's like this bald guy and all crazy looking dude in pants, and he's like, arr, and he's like, and then he reaches over and touches Leo and runs, and then he's like, tag, you're it, and bolts the other way. From like, yeah, they're gonna kill you to tag, you're it, and then he runs away. It's a great use of just a little humor in the very seriousness of this film. So anyway, there's another scene where he kind of meets somebody he thinks is the person he's looking for. And in this whole scene and discussion with the guy Leo is talking to, and who's played by Jackie Earle Haley, by the way, which awesome. I love Jackie. Love me some Jackie Earle Haley, creepy guy. Or I shouldn't say creepy guy, just plays a lot of creepy parts. That's what I'll say. Yeah, he's really good at it. But like Leo almost dies by the guy that, you know, hit tagged on him. And he fights him, and then Mark Ruffalo hauls that guy away with a guard. And so now Ruffalo and Leo are separated, and now Leo's talking to this guy, and you know, he's got visions of his wife and all this stuff, and he's like, "Nah, they're not the crazy ones, you're the crazy one," you know, all this stuff. So lots and lots of things where you're making, you know, it's making you question a lot of stuff. So
yeah, I love the one scene though where the guy comes out and chokes Leo from behind and is, you know, telling him about the horrors of the outside world. And he's like, you know how hydrogen bombs work? And Leo's just like, hydrogen.
No, he said, what's hydrogen? He's like, stop playing with me.
No, he
what?
said hydrogen.
Yeah, I thought he said, what is hydrogen?
No,
Playing
he
with the
just
guy.
says hydrogen. He's answering the guy's question in a
like a tongue-in-cheek way.
yeah. So the guy's like, you know how hydrogen bombs work? And then Leo's just like, hydrogen, and then the guy's like, hi, very funny, and then continues on his rant.
Oh man, but so yeah, after this, I think is where we get to a couple more scenes, and then eventually we hit the Ted Devine scene in the car. Before we dive into the ending of the film, David, how would you pitch this, or how would you recommend this to other people before we dive into our spoiler section of Shutter Island?
Let's see. I would say that anyone, because it's a very intense movie. So if some people are kind of sensitive to really intense scenes of like, because it's not like super gory, but there's
definitely some gruesomeness to it.
There's some gruesomeness, and it's just it's not like over the top, but it's just presented in this really intense way so if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, I would probably not recommend this film. But if you can handle that sort of thing, then I would say that that if you can handle that sort of thing, then this is a film for you.
Yeah, again, it's like, it's a pretty, I would say a pretty hard R. It's got, a lot of football.
Hard R.
Wow, David.
We just got demonetized.
Anyway, yeah, it's a serious one, but I'd highly recommend it. It's a creepy one, but then as you go along, you're kind of, it's a fun mystery. You're getting through it. I would just say that just based off, it's a very fast-paced film in the way that it's presented, in the way it's edited. And I love that, I think, about the film the most, because a lot of films like this kind of take their time and soak in and kind of lay it out slowly. And with this film, it does lay it out I wouldn't say slowly, it lays it out in a formally manner.
It's more methodical.
And it's more it's methodical, but one thing I love about Scorsese's films is that with the editing specifically, it's to the point. It makes it really entertaining, and it's presented in a way that you're invested. There's mystery, there's intrigue. Everything's revealed at, I believe, just the right time in this movie. It's a dang good watch. Great performances. I'd highly recommend it. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, I'd say go watch it. It is pretty gruesome. It is pretty messed up and stuff and subject matter. And so just be aware of that going in. Like, if you don't like seeing dead people, don't watch this movie. So, especially having to do with suicide and all these kind of themes. So, and crazy people in general. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to dive into the spoiler discussion. And
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. So, if you're not aware, you don't worry. If you're not interested in this part, skip to the next part of this podcast where we'll start talking about the movie Stay and dive into that film. So, with that, David, let's dive into the ending of this film. And I want you to kind of present it to us in a way where does it first hit you that you're like, in this film, not even the ending, but where does it hit you where you're like, I don't think Leo's seeing what he's seeing, or I don't think he believes what he believes, or you don't think the reality is what he's believing right now? When does that hit you in the film? Whether it be earlier or later.
I think where it starts to, where shit gets real,
Yeah.
I think would be in the cave scene with because before in the film they're like, oh, we no longer need your services because, we found her. We found the escape patient. And he talks to her. And there's some very interesting dream sequences that he has that feature her that kind of like foreshadow what happens later in the movie, which is very interesting. But she's not actually the escaped. She's not actually the escape patient. She's just like a random person that they brought in to kind of fool him. So he goes into this cave on the cliffside. So he's with his partner. He's with Mark Ruffalo, and he looks at the lighthouse. They've been told that the lighthouse is a sewage treatment plant, but Leo is convinced that some shady stuff is going on in this place. So he wants to get there. His partner is like, because it's like out on a little like tiny little outcropping of rock that gets like completely covered, like separated from the mainland when the tide comes in. And it's all the way down these cliffs and through some water. And so Mark Ruffalo is like, "You're crazy, man. We can't get there." But Leo's convinced that he has to go there. He has to see what's going on there. And so there's this part where they're both looking out over the lighthouse, and then all of a sudden, Mark Ruffalo's gone. He's just gone.
No, that's not. I don't think that's the order of things. I think because Jackie Earle Haley's character tells him, "Hey, you can't believe your partner. Have you met him? Do you know him?" And then he gets into an argument with Ruffalo, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm going there no matter what.
No,
if you want to leave me, so be it."
Yeah, no. This happens. This happens
after that.
This happens after that.
Okay, yeah.
So they're out in the forest looking over at the lighthouse, and at first,
because they go to the cliff, and he's like, "Let's go to the lighthouse."
Yeah,
and then
Mark Ruffalo is basically telling him like, "This is
you're right. He is gone." And then he just leaves and tries to get to the lighthouse, doesn't get there, comes back. Right?
Yeah, he's just gone because Mark Ruffalo doesn't want to go, but then he's gonna go if Leo is intent on going. But then by this time, because of what the guy had said, the inmate had said in Ward C, he no longer trusts Mark Ruffalo. And so after that argument, Leo then insists that he's going to go on alone, even though Mark Ruffalo actually relents and says, "Okay, I'll go with you." But after this argument, Leo's like, no, stay here. And so he tries to go get to the lighthouse.
Fails, comes back.
And Mark Ruffalo is just gone. And then he sees what looks like a body down on the shore, like down the cliff where the waves meet the rocks. And so he's like, "Oh my God." He thinks it's his Mark Ruffalo just fell off the cliff, and he goes down there, and it's just like a vaguely human body shaped like white spot on the rock. And so that's when he looks back up, because he climbs all the way down to see it, and then he looks back up the cliff and he sees a little light flickering in a cave, and he goes in there and he finds the real patient who escaped, and she drops some interesting
revelations.
Yeah, interesting revelations. And so I would say for me, that whole sequence where he's just like, because it sets it up so well with the like crazy guy saying, "Don't trust your partner." And you're like, this could just be a red herring,
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden you have this whole sequence where Leo's seeing things that are just like, is clearly seeing things, like it's clearly he's seeing things that aren't there, and Mark Ruffalo is just gone. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he he gets the real story, which, when the ending comes, we'll find out is not quite as real as you thought.
Yeah, the whole disappearing of, I think, Ruffalo's character is kind of, I would say, subject to that, where you're like, all right, something's going on with him and his mind. You think he's crazy. You think he's not crazy, but he's on the bridge of being crazy. And then he goes back and they say, what partner? We don't know what you're talking about. You never came here with a partner. And Ben Kingsley's all suave and like motifs. And he's like, yes, you never had a partner. Yes. And then and then he says, when he admits that, yeah, you're right, I was like, okay, he's playing the game. He's trying to just stay alive and to stay sane, in quotes. Okay, that's cool. And through this whole ending sequence, I kind of kept believing, like, yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio, he's right. He's in the right. Like, this place is crazy. And then you get to the lighthouse eventually, and you get him being there. And even though his wife's coming to him and she through the visions, and she's like, no, like you are, or, don't you want to be with us, And he's like, yeah, but, I got to do what's right. And I think it's with the warden scene specifically before I even mentioned all this. I think it's the warden scene that really hops out to me, where I'm like, okay, things are not as they seem, So as we go into the lighthouse, Leo, he knows he knows Ruffalo, his part. He knows Chuck's up there. He knows his partner's up there. He goes up there. He fights his way to it, punches the card, runs up the stairs. The whole lighthouse is empty. Then he gets to the top floor, and Ben Kingsley's there. And it's revealed to the audience that, or at least from Ben Kingsley's perspective, that, hey, we're not crazy. You're crazy. And basically says, no, you've been an inmate here for 2 years. And for 24 months. And what else does he say, David? He says, you've been here, an inmate here for 24 months.
He basically...
And you've regressed the last 6 or something like that.
Well, he basically tells Leo that he's their most violent and most dangerous patient. And that the bigwigs, the people who are really in charge, are starting to get tired of it and are demanding to Kingsley that something be done. And they're basically saying, either you fix this guy or lobotomize him, because he's becoming a huge issue. You got to deal with him. And so Ben Kingsley is set up through the whole movie as this kind of like trailblazing progressive doctor who really cares for mentally ill people and doesn't want to just pump them full of drugs or lock them up in a cell. He wants to heal them. And so Ben Kingsley lays out this idea that he had to avoid having to lobotomize DiCaprio, where he basically says, okay, we're going to set up this giant role-playing experience where DiCaprio we've let you have the run of this place for the last 2 days. We've let you play out your fantasy to its full extent in the hopes that at the end of playing out your fantasy, that you'll come back to reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like, yeah, you're one of the inmates here. You are crazy. You do have a pass as a marshal, and so we're going to play into that and let you live this out.
He doesn't have a pass as a marshal.
Oh, he doesn't? I thought he did.
Oh, you're right. You're right. He was a U.S. Marshal.
Yeah.
And he also was present for the liberation of Dachau. So those parts are true. But he is not. But according to what Kingsley says, he's not a U.S. Marshal visiting the island. He's an inmate there who was a U.S. Marshal a long time ago.
Yeah, and so they talk in the big old crow's nest of the lighthouse. You have them going back and forth. He's about to do something to Ben Kingsley, and then the person that Ben Kingsley called on the phone walks in the door, and boom, it's Mark Ruffalo. Oh my God. And turns out Mark Ruffalo has been his psychiatrist the last 2 years and his doctor for the island.
It's interesting how they set it up too, because they refer to the primary doctor for the escape patient as a Dr. Sheehan, but conveniently, Dr. Sheehan is away on vacation right before DiCaprio gets on the island, so DiCaprio never meets Dr. Sheehan, even though he wants to talk to him. And then, fast forward to the end, Mark Ruffalo comes in, and turns out Mark Ruffalo is Dr. Sheehan and has also been treating DiCaprio.
I just want to shout out the way the descent into madness is presented in this film, because you have, for example, you have the lady who was drinking the cup, who wasn't really holding the cup, right? In that scene. And she's telling, Leonardo DiCaprio to run. You have the Ted Devine, you have Jackie Earle Haley talking to Leo, and he's like, no. Like, there's more to this than meets the eye. They're after you, blah, blah, blah. Your partner's your partner isn't like to be trusted, and you need to get out of here. So everybody's telling him, you got to get out of here, man. And it's interesting how Jackie Earle Haley's character knows a lot about the past of him, which is very interesting, which brings up, I think, the look-alike of Robert De Niro in this film, in that dream sequence where it's like supposed to be the arsonist that killed Leo's wife. It's the kind of this, as we've established here, it's kind of this thing that his Teddy has created in his mind. I don't know if it's something he created to deal with, or it's somebody he knew in the past as a U.S. Marshal.
See, that's the interesting
That's
thing.
the interesting thing. You don't know what it is. Because this is supposed to be the guy who killed his wife.
Mm-hmm.
There's a large gash across his face. He's an evil man, and he's the bad guy in Leo's mind that he's tracking down. So it's like, was this guy created in his mind? Was he a past experience he had as a cop or a marshal? Was it somebody he knew, related to? I don't know.
Yeah, because all the other characters in the movie have they kind of have dual roles that they play. So Mark Ruffalo is DiCaprio's partner, but also Dr. Sheehan.
Yeah.
And then you have the inmate in Ward C, who is the person that Leo tracked down to about how he heard about Shutter Island in the first place, which started the whole thing, why he wanted to go there and investigate it. But then at the end, and he's talking to this guy, George Noyce. He's like, how'd they get you? You're back in here. How'd they get you?
Yeah.
And his face is all messed up, and George Noyce is like, you did this to me. And what presents at the time is the idea that, you did this to me because you were looking too deeply into this, and they noticed, and so they tracked me down because they noticed you looking into it. So you did this to me. And then later, Ben Kingsley tells DiCaprio, oh yeah, you beat up George Noyce.
Yeah.
So you did this to me has kind of a dual meaning. So all this stuff has a dual fantasy versus reality kind of thing. But this Andrew Latis character, who's the arsonist, doesn't have a real life analog.
No.
So it's very mysterious.
Very mysterious. And it's just I kind of see it as, it could be said that, this Jackie Earle Haley character is that person he's kind of picturing in his mind. He just doesn't remember it yet or not. I don't know. That could be associated with it. But what I think it is actually I think it's literally his inner demon, just the worst side of DiCaprio is that character. Because, as it's revealed, or supposedly revealed, we don't know. But, we were given the flashback sequence after DiCaprio's kind of knocked out, I think. Or like he picks up the gun, shoots him, it breaks, and he's like, wait, what? And like you see blood on the splatter. You think Ben Kingsley's dead. He cuts back to him. No, he's not dead. He didn't shoot real bullets. There's no blood.
Well, the interesting thing
and the
is,
gun falls apart.
I don't know if you noticed this, but in the scene where he picks up the gun and shoots Ben Kingsley, you see blood splatter from Ben Kingsley on the wall behind him, but Ben Kingsley is standing there motionless.
Yeah.
And so it's like it only lasts for like a second, so it's hard to notice. But like when he's shooting Ben Kingsley's not falling down or anything. Like nothing's happening except there's blood splattering on the wall behind him. And then it cuts to DiCaprio holding the gun and is like, oh my God, it's fake. And he breaks it.
Yeah, it's like a toy. And then like he gets knocked out. They really, really try to convince him that he is, what they tell him he is. That he did like murder. He murdered his wife and he beat up the guy in the cell and stuff. And then Ben Kingsley pulls out these photos of his dead children. He's like, no, your wife murdered your children. She drowned them. Look at him. Do you remember? He's like, I don't have any kids.
Well, he remembers his kids, but he doesn't remember his daughter.
Oh,
yeah, he does. He remembers.
I thought he said he doesn't have any kids.
No. He says I don't have a daughter.
Oh, that's right. I don't have a daughter. I have a son.
Yeah, he has two sons. But he also has a daughter. And when Kingsley shows him the photo and says, "This is your daughter," he's like, "But I don't have a daughter." And it's interesting because earlier in the film, DiCaprio has some dreams where he sees the escape patient, but not the one in the cave, but the one they brought in to say, "Oh, she's back now. You don't have to be here anymore," kind of a thing. He sees her because she was said to have killed her children.
Yeah.
Her 3 children, like early on in the movie, and you see her with who you assume you don't really get a good look at the other 2, so they could actually be DiCaprio's 2 sons, but you don't actually get a really good look at them. You only get a really good look at the daughter because she shows up in a couple different scenes. So you see her associated with the escape patient character, so you think she's the daughter of the lady who murdered her kids.
Yeah.
And then flash forward to the ending, you see Ben Kingsley showing DiCaprio pictures of his kids, and lo and behold, there's a picture of that same girl, and DiCaprio's like, "But wait, I don't have a daughter."
Yeah, it's interesting because kind of like what we were talking about earlier, the lady, Jackie Earle Haley, and then you have Ted Devine come in, Ted Devine, and he kind of reaffirms like, "Can your violence overcome my violence?"
Oh yeah. That was one of the best lines in the movie.
And he delivers it so well too, Ted Devine.
And then also like right before he lets DiCaprio out of the Jeep, he's like, "If I sunk my teeth into you, would you be able to kill me before you went blind?" Or I can't remember
or whatever
exactly
he
how
says,
it goes,
yeah.
but
yeah, he's like, "Do you think you can kill me before
something before I blind you," or something like that.
And then what does he say? He says, it's really poignant what DiCaprio responds with. He says something like, "Yeah, I could."
Well, he says, "Try it."
Oh, he says, "Try it." Yeah. And then,
yeah.
And then he gets out of the
Ted
Jeep.
Devine's is like, "Oh, there we go.
That's
what I was talking about.
And like, you have these characters reaffirming that he's not crazy, which I think is perfectly set up from the writing of this movie or the novel even. And because you believe the whole time, like I believed till the very, very end that he wasn't crazy, that it wasn't an inmate. This was actually all true. What we were seeing from his perspective, it's all true. But I think that's a trick the writers are using to say like, no. This is like, we're going to plant this stuff here so that you think, so that we're left at the very, very end even to say like, but what if, what if?
Yeah,
what if he's not crazy?
The really interesting part too is when you first see all the fantastical elements, like the weird cuts and the dream sequences and the hallucinations, you're like, is DiCaprio crazy?
Mm-hmm.
It's like he could be, he could not be. And then all of a sudden you get the reveal in the cave with the real escape patient who used to be a doctor. But then they branded her as crazy and turned her into an inmate when she started asking too many questions about the place. And she like basically affirms that, no, he's not crazy because she's like, you had any like, shakes, any like weird dreams? You've eaten the food here? Tell me at least you smoked your own cigarettes. And it calls back to where, the orderly guy's like, oh, too bad your cigarettes were just,
drenched.
Completely drenched. But he puts a fresh pack on top of their clothes. But don't worry, I got you.
I got some Lucky Strikes for you,
Yeah.
But it's that's the only thing I will say is that lady in the cave, I'm going to assume she's a setup, kind of like the whole island has been a setup for Leo. But what if she isn't? What if she's actually a patient? Or that was a patient that also was a doctor at some point? Like, I'm going to assume she's a plant, but what if she wasn't? What does your assessment say?
My theory is that she was a hallucination.
Ooh, okay.
Because you get the reveal in the cave right after Mark Ruffalo just completely disappears, and then Leo freaks out and thinks he sees Mark Ruffalo's dead body on the rocks below, and he gets there, and it's like...
By the way, he free climbs down that whole face of cliffs, and I'm like, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I believe everything in this film except for that thing.
That's really interesting too, because that plays into the whole...
Oh, like it was a hallucination.
That plays into the whole like delusional element of it too. Like the whole thing could have been an delusion, or it could have also been the idea that he was so crazy that like something that no sane person would try or even have the stamina to do, he was able to do just because of sheer... just because of how insane he was.
How insane it was, yeah.
But I kind of lean towards the whole thing was just kind of like a hallucination. Yeah,
and I think it'd be interesting, even if you haven't watched this film and you're listening to the spoiler discussion that we're saying, I would just still recommend watch the film because with this knowledge that you have obtained here, if you haven't watched it yet, go into it and put it on and try to analyze it like, is he actually this way? Is he not? Is the island playing tricks on him? Is this his descent into madness, or is this he's already descended into it,
And, even though the conclusion is pretty clear.
It's pretty clear, yeah.
But it leaves
enough.
It leaves enough doubt where even knowing the ending, it's very interesting to go into it and with that sort of nugget of doubt, try to analyze all the different things that are happening and try and see if you can come to your own conclusion about it.
Yeah. And I just want to talk about the last scene before we go into the next movie here. The last scene where Ruffalo goes to him, because we know DiCaprio, it's been established, I think, in this film that DiCaprio's character is a very smart guy. And he knows how to finesse his way around things. He knows the right things to say. We've established that already with him talking to Ben Kingsley after he comes back from that cave that we've established could be a hallucination. And Ben Kingsley tells him, "Oh, what partner? We don't know what partner you're talking about." And he says, because he knows, he's smart enough to know that, okay, if I say and affirm Ben Kingsley or affirm this doctor, then I will be able to stay alive and not be locked up. Yeah. If I go crazy right now or do anything rash, then they're going to lock me up.
Yeah. Ben Kingsley is like, after he tells Leo that Leo doesn't have a partner. Then Ben Kingsley is like, okay, now tell me about this partner.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Leo's very smart, and he just responds with, what partner?
It's so good. And so with that, you get to the very end where Mark Ruffalo's like, I don't know what he says to him, but then Leo responds with, I think they almost had us, Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
And then Chuck's like, yeah, they almost had us. And he looks over to Ben Kingsley and the doctors, and he shakes his head, and they're like, oh my God, are you serious? He's still crazy. He's not getting any better. And it just,
Yeah,
I was like, is DiCaprio's character, is Teddy saying this because he can't find a way out, or he's going to try to escape through this? Like, what's going to happen? And then he just walks away with the guards, and they're going to go up lobotomize him.
Yeah, and it just shows the lighthouse, and then the movie's over.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting, too, because that, like, you have this whole big reveal, this whole, like, Leonardo just, like, literally breaks down, and he's like, and suddenly he remembers everything.
Yeah.
Like, you see the whole sequence of him coming back from work to the lake house. He sees his wife out in front of the lake, sitting on the porch swing. She greets him. She's soaking wet. He's like, what's going on here? And she's just like acting like nothing's. And then he sees bodies floating in the water. And he's like, oh my God. And it's his 3 children dead in the water. And he pulls them out of the lake and sets them on the ground. And he's like literally breaking down, like screaming and crying. It's actually quite convincing.
Yeah, he's really good.
He is like, he's just like, I mean,
he's broken.
If you lost your children in that manner, it would break you. Like any death of a loved one.
And the fact that it was done by someone you loved as well.
Any death of a loved one is tragic and can break a person, but like having your children be taken from you in this particular manner would absolutely destroy a person. And so he really shows that. And yeah, and then and then you see just how crazy and delusional his wife is, because she's like, yeah, we'll just dry them off and we'll change their clothes and they'll be like our living dolls.
Yeah, and you're like, oh my gosh, she's so crazy.
And then he's like,
all right.
He just breaks down completely. He draws his wife in for one final embrace, and then the gunshot goes off, and you see her fall, and she's bloody.
Yeah.
And he's just sitting there crying and weeping. And so this is basically his memory of the event coming back to him. And he's like, oh my God, I'm Andrew Latis. And he has this realization like, oh my God. And you think that that's finally it. But then he's cleaned up. He's sitting on the steps. He's talking with Mark Ruffalo. And then all of a sudden, he's like back into it. He's like, oh, they almost got us this time. But, we're too smart for them. And so it's really funny because like in that moment, you're like, oh my God, he wasn't crazy. It's going to be like this. He's going to blow the lid wide open. We got
another half hour of this movie, right? You know, he's going to escape the island.
Yeah, he's going to escape somehow, and he's going to bring these people to justice. But no, he just goes with them to be lobotomized. But he says something very telling, and I didn't actually notice this until I watched the movie this time. He says, is it better to die a good man or live as a monster? I can't remember the exact order. That's exactly
what he says, yeah.
But yeah.
To die as a man or live as a monster.
Die as a good man or live as a monster. He says that to Mark Ruffalo right before he goes away to be lobotomized. And so I never really put it together, but to me what that says is he actually did have a breakthrough moment where the delusion was shattered and he was sane once more. But then when he took a look at his life, with all with his fantasy stripped away, he's like, he looked at himself and he's like, I can't live like this. I can't go on living knowing that this happened to me and that I murdered my wife. I just can't deal with it. And so my interpretation of this scene is that he chooses to be lobotomized so that he doesn't have to continue to live his life knowing what he did and what happened to him. And he does it very smart, where he just like he convinces them that he's just back in his delusion, that he's regressed.
Yeah, it's such a cool ending. It's so good. Like, I think your interpretation is correct, because I think we've established he's already smart enough to do that. He's also now self-aware more. He finally has the breakthrough, like you're saying. And now he's like, well, I guess I just rather just go be with my wife or my kids, and he dies. And he makes the choice. So quite a poignant ending to Shutter Island. So a fantastic movie. Man, what a good movie. And I don't even think, and it's funny because this film doesn't really, like you were saying, it isn't really remembered that much. Like, it's mentioned, but very passively. Like, when you especially look at Scorsese's filmography, there's vast amounts of films in it, and there's a lot of great ones, but mostly everybody remembers the classics and stuff. But I would say this one is, I mean, I don't know if it compares. I'd say it compares definitely to his other stuff. Like, it's that good. And I don't think we need to get into a topic of what's better or what's worse in his filmography, but I think it's deservedly a film that deserves to be remembered for, I think, the greatness that it is. And good pick, David. So it's a dang good movie. That was a mighty fine movie. So yeah. All right, Shutter Island, 9.9 stars out of 10. Yeah, that's what we're doing now.
All right, spoilers are over.
Spoilers are over. And
moving on to Stay.
Moving on to Stay. Released in 2005, Stay is a film directed by Mark Forster, written by David Beanoff, starring Ian McGregor, Naomi Watts, Ryan Gosling, and a surprise role of Bob Hoskins. The description says here, a psychiatrist attempts to prevent one of his patients from committing suicide while trying to maintain his own grip on reality. So, you've probably never, ever, ever heard of this film, audience. Ever in your life. Because it came out, didn't get a whole lot of money, didn't get a whole lot of attention, was pulled out of theaters, I think, in like the third week it was in.
Oh, yeah. Has a like 27% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, something like that. Or at least it
at this time, yeah.
Jake sent me an analysis video of it because it's if you don't have this without this analysis in mind, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So
yeah, 26 on Rotten Tomatoes, 69% audience score. So yeah, this film was not loved by critics at all. People didn't like it. Roger Ebert did, though. So that was an interesting fact. He did give it a fair score, I would say.
What was the score that he gave it?
I don't remember. I think it's like 3.5 out of 4 stars.
Yeah, it was something like that.
Could be 2.5 out of 4 stars, which
I think it was like,
that would be like
3
65%.
stars.
Oh, 3 stars.
I think it was
yeah.
3 stars.
So like 75%. Yeah.
So he gave it a favorable review, but
Yeah.
not like a stellar review.
Yeah. So this is a movie you've most likely never heard of. You got Ryan Gosling, Ian McGregor, Naomi Watts. It's a very, what I would recommend, and this also, by the way, I want to also, we'll mention at the end where to find these films, but I couldn't find, at the time when I discovered this film, I found it through Chris Stuckman, the analysis he did, and I started watching it, and then he was going to dive into the whole plot of the movie, and it's one of those where I'm like, you know what, I'd rather track this movie down, watch it, and then finish this, because this seems like a very interesting film to watch. And so I found it on Amazon. I bought the DVD for like $15, got it to my house. I stuck it in and watched it. And I was very impressed. I was like, this is really interesting. What's going on in this film? And it's going to require me to watch it again, I think. Like, this is very interesting. And so basically, after that, I watched the analysis. I'm like, oh, okay. And so it's very much one of those films that you would want to call, I would say, pretentious in the way it's made, in the way it presents itself. However, Stuckman kind of brings up a point where it's kind of not so much that way. A lot of things in this film, if you pay attention, make sense. I think when you compare something like Shutter Island, it's a story beginning to end, has a conclusion, and you know what's going on, or at least you think you know. And it's handled in a masterful way where it's entertaining and it's handled with finesse. With Stay, it's more of like an experimental and psychological presentation of somebody's mind and the regrets they have in life.
Yeah. And so what's really interesting to me is, so my first impressions of this movie were completely untainted by this analysis video, but then I watched the analysis video afterwards. And I was very surprised that this movie had been so critically panned and been cast off as pretentious. Because when I watched it, pretentious is not the...
It's not the word I would use.
Yeah, it's not the impression that I got from it. It was the impression that is like, okay, something more is going on in this film. And, you know, it's something that normally, you know, I would watch it again, try to figure out what's going on. But then I just watched the analysis video, and it's like the way he breaks it down makes a whole lot of sense. And I don't know if I would have come to that same conclusion exactly had I tried to watch it multiple times on my own, but I think I would have.
You gotten pretty close.
I would have. I would probably come pretty close to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretentious.
That's not the
is
word.
not the way I would describe this movie. So it's very, very odd to me that this movie was so critically panned, because unlike Shutter Island, which is an amazing movie from start to finish, every performance is great. The cinematography is excellent, with the exception of that Ted Devine scene, which I think that was on purpose.
Yeah, that was on purpose.
This film is like, it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
The cinematography is not that great. And there's some weird editing choices.
Very weird editing choices.
And it doesn't make, they seem just like weird moments until later on the film, in the film, when it gets
revealed.
when it gets worse.
Yeah, when it gets worse.
When it gets way worse, then you're like, okay, maybe something's going on here. But like, to begin with, there's just some weird edits, and you're like, well, that was what? And the performances are very lackluster. That everyone just seems like they're phoning it in. You know. And like the whole aesthetic of the movie is drab and
dark and
just kind of dreary.
Very emo, I would say.
Yeah. It doesn't grab your attention from the very beginning. It's not like Shutter Island, where it's like, it's a wild ride from start to finish. This is just like, the beginning is very slow and like, what? But then as it gets deeper into, you're like, oh, something clearly is going on here that I don't quite understand yet.
Yeah, and it literally takes up into the very end until you kind of get a good idea of what is happening and what has happened through this whole film. So the best way I would describe this film to people, I would recommend seeing this film just on the basis of, I don't think there's many films out there like it. I think there's a lot of films that will take this kind of format that this film is in, like where, oh, we're doing this stuff and we're seeing weird things, and oh my gosh, it's a dream, or it's a vision, or it's a way this person's disappeared, or something like that. And then you get to the end, it's all revealed. Oh my gosh, the revelation. Oh wow, aren't we so smart? A lot of films fall into the pretentious category very easily when it's doing this kind of format. The difference with this film is it is in the format, but it doesn't do it pretentiously or up its own butt. I think it's easy to assume that, especially on the first viewing. But when you get to the end and you see what this is all about, you kind of are like, oh, okay. What? Wait, what? And it makes you question it. Now, I think before we even talk anymore, I do want to say this film, it's very not well known. You can't really stream it anywhere. It's called Stay. It's also a very interesting title because I don't really fully have a good idea of what it even means. Oh, wait. No, never mind. I just got to me. Maybe. I don't know. I'll have to put more thought into it, but we'll discuss that in the spoilers. But I think it's worth a watch because it ties a lot of things throughout its runtime together. And everything that is presented to us, for the most part, I would say, maybe except for maybe one scene in my mind, all forms together in the end and makes sense for our character, Ryan Gosling. And so I've been wondering how to discuss this film because I think it's fine to discuss it without spoilers. We're not going to go to spoilers right away. So let's kind of walk through a film and kind of discuss the acting, kind of discuss the happenings. I see one of the reviewers called it a very muddled brain teaser. And I'm like, I think muddle's the word I would use. But this film requires a lot more, I would say, nuance when you're watching it. It's not just to be entertaining. It's more to be like, take a look into somebody's mind. And sometimes that's not very clear.
Yeah. And what's interesting about the movie, too, is the analysis of this guy on YouTube,
Chris Stuckman.
His takeaway is that this is one of the most brilliant films ever concocted, and I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know if that's true. Like, I think his conclusion about what the story means is right on, but I don't know if all the connections he's drawing were actually intentional or not, because muddled, I feel like is a good word. Like this, I mean, we'll never know short of, calling up the director and having him on Snarp Fangle with us.
Mark Forrester, the director of films such as Finding Neverland or,
Yeah, we'll never know for real, but it's in my mind, it's a very interesting question of whether a lot of the things in this movie were intentional or he didn't quite know what he was doing, and it just he only had a very dim, muddled vision of what he wanted to do, and the connections that this Stuckman guy on YouTube are just kind of accidentally worked the way they did, because sometimes movies are like that.
Yeah, maybe it goes in with something else and it achieves another thing that wasn't intentional.
Yeah, the Barbie movie, I think, is a good example of that. Mm-hmm. It's like directed by a very, very outspoken, like classic, like 80s, 90s feminist type director, and then the message of the movie is like anti-feminism in a way. It's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's weird how some films that, like you said, like especially the writer Noah Baumbach, who wrote that film, very much, and the director Greta Gerwig, who I think is a fine director. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with her stuff, but yeah, it's very much she's her and her husband, by the way, who wrote this film and the Barbie film, very much went into it with a point of making a point, but they kind of made the opposite point.
Yeah,
in their argument.
Yeah, they didn't end up making the point they wanted to make. And of course, some people will say, "Well, no, they really wanted."
That's part of it, man.
It's a genius movie. It's like, no. Looking at who the director is, there's no way that the point that Barbie ended up making is what they envisioned. So with going back to Stay,
yeah. Speaking of Ryan Gosling,
yeah, exactly. That wow. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
That was totally, I was connecting those two movies in a completely different way. And we got the Ryan Gosling connection.
We got the Ryan Gosling connection. 1 degree of separation there, baby.
What is it? 6 degrees of Kevin
6
Bacon?
degrees of Kevin Bacon and 1 degree of Ryan Gosling.
But yeah, I don't know for sure, but it's my sneaking suspicion that something similar may have ended up happening, is that the director of Stay went into it with a not very clear vision and sort of accidentally ended up making a very profound movie with all these different connections you can draw.
I think for me, it's the writing in this film. Maybe not the dialogue specifically, but the way I feel like you could recut this film in many different ways for it to make more sense and to make it more streamlined. However, I feel like this is an impossible film to pitch to people and to advertise to people. Like the trailer, if you go watch it, is like, it's a mystery and you don't know what's happening and weird stuff's happening and oh my God, there's a dog that bites you in McGregor. What? but it deals with, it's beautiful, I think, in the themes of it mostly. And I feel like with the writing and with what David Bainhoff, who you might notice the name from Bainhoff and Weiss, who did the Game of Thrones series. So he's been in the industry for a while, did a lot of different movies, and this is one of them. And I would say and argue that it's well written in the way that in the themes of it's trying to convey. I just think it's such a hard concept to convey to people that it ends up being a very hard and boring and drab movie to watch, trying to connect that to you. And we're kind of talking around the whole theme of this film, which it's hard to talk about this film without spoiling it.
Yeah, because I mean, before you get to the end and you realize what's going on, like this movie is very confusing. It's a very hostile film. It expects a lot of the audience.
Yeah.
It does nothing to draw you into it.
No.
In fact, there are certain points where you could be easily pushed away from this and be like, "Whoa,
what was that? Why did I watch that?"
Yeah.
I feel like I would say that I just want to give the audience a little bit of meat. Basically, you have Ryan Gosling, who's this character named Henry, and he's meeting with a psychiatrist played by Ian McGregor. And throughout the whole film, he's telling Ian McGregor, his psychologist, that he wants to die. He wants to commit suicide. He wants to get out of this world because he's a failed artist in his mind. He wants to find love, but he has a ring, but he can't find it, or he can't find love. So he's down on his luck. He's failing in life. It's his 21st birthday on Saturday. He's responsible for his mother and father's death, and it's just him now alone as a college student, and he just wants to end it all. And it's part of Ian McGregor's character trying to help him, trying to save him throughout this whole film and convince him that, no, life is worth living. But I don't think Ian McGregor does a very good job of convincing Henry that he needs to live. He's very much like just asking boring questions and questions of analyzing and his thought process, when in reality, he should be like, okay, let me have you meet Naomi Watts' character and talk about that kind of stuff. Because I think that would be great. Like, she has a similar experience to you. She tried to commit suicide, and you should meet her and talk to her. She's my girlfriend, and there's many ways he could have helped him out in this movie.
Well, I mean, they
doesn't.
Specifically, they do mention that.
They do.
And
really?
Naomi Watts' character actually suggests to him that she should talk to him.
I didn't catch that.
But he says, no, that would be an ethical violation. I think. Okay. Well, I think it has to do with like doctor-patient confidentiality.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's what it has to do with.
I get that, but
you're right in that Ewan McGregor does not.
It's just a thought, like
he
to
doesn't
help the situation,
Yeah, he doesn't actually really do a good job.
No, and like you see Henry's character's further descent into madness, not like DiCaprio's in Shutter Island, but another person who is just completely broken and is falling apart, and he's like things happen in this film, like when he meets Bob Hoskins' character, and he kind of just breaks down and he says, "No, that's my dad. That's my dad. That's my dad. You're supposed to be dead." And Bob Hoskins' character is like, "Well, I need to leave. I need to diffuse the situation." He's the one smart psychiatrist in this film who's also a doctor, and kind of lets Ian McGregor help Henry out with this situation. But it's interesting because you have Henry who's hearing voices, you have him seeing visions, you have him getting people telling him different things, and he's like, "Yeah, screw life, I don't care." And then he's kind of melancholy, starting to figure out there's something more happening as he's building up to Saturday where he's going to commit suicide. And Ian McGregor gets that same feeling. He's like, "What else? Yeah, something's going on. What's happening here? Like, things are not as they all seem to be." And I think before we dive in, we can dive into the spoiler, I think, after this, but I want to say that I would recommend you take a gander at this film. It's very fascinating to watch, and I think it's an acquired taste for some people. Like for Chris Stuckman, it hit him like really well. He really loved it. He enjoyed it, and after a second viewing, I would say, but go in knowing that this is a film that you really need to just ponder and think throughout the entire thing and give it your undivided attention. Which is, hard for me personally, but you have to give it your undivided attention because there's a lot of things that you're going to miss the first time going on into it. And then you get into the analysis. I would highly recommend also going to Stuckman's analysis of the film after you watch it because it really does help a lot and also puts in perspective. And I think also, shout out to Stuckman, he did a really wonderful job analyzing this film and also presenting it in a way that's understandable, but also conveying to the audience the reason why films like this aren't successful and what takeaways we can get from that. So that's what I would recommend is, let's see, where can you stream it before we get into spoiler? We'll save that for after the spoiler discussion, but basically I had to buy the DVD from Amazon, so that gives you an idea of how to find this film. Shutter Island, I think its point of recording is on Apple TV Plus.
It's on Paramount Plus.
Oh, so is it? Or is it on Apple?
I don't know. It might be on Apple, but specifically
you
as
could
far
just
as
rent these films on any digital service. I think YouTube has both of them. That's what we did.
Yeah.
So we rented Shutter Island on YouTube. I had the DVD of Stay, and so we watched it that way. So I would just, if you're intrigued one night and you got a cup of tea with you or any drink you'd like, and you're ready to sit down and watch something that you really need to like you give your undivided attention to, and you're ready to soak in something, I would recommend Stay. If you just want a dang good thriller movie, go to Shutter Island.
But for those who do subscribe to Paramount Plus, Shutter Island is on there. Yeah.
And then Stay is on Fubo, whatever that is. It's some random streaming service. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably like, I don't know. Some random streaming service, but you can rent it or just find a copy of it on Amazon or eBay or whatever. What have you. So as with that, David, let's dive into the spoiler discussion of the movie Stay. Warning, ladies and gentlemen.
So you mean we can finally talk about the plot of the movie?
Yeah, the plot of the movie. Yeah. So let's dive into it right now. Warning, this is spoilers for the 2005's Stay. So here we go. In my notes I have written, Ryan Gosling is just a boy. Psychosis? Henry Letham? Ian McGregor's accent is always weird to me. I know he's doing an American accent in this movie, but it just sounds strange knowing he's really Scottish. His American accent isn't bad at all, but compared to other actors especially.
Yeah, I think that's what we talked about when we were watching it. It's like it was interesting how his
I like how we talked about the discussion, like, let's dive into the plot of the movie, and now we're just talking about right away his accent.
Yeah, I guess we could have talked about that.
I guess we could have talked about that, but whatever.
Yeah, it's worth talking about. Is
it?
How
is it, David?
Well, I mean, it was.
It was I wrote it down, but not everything written should be read.
Yeah, but it was both of our impressions.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
It was both of our impressions. Yeah. So I think it's worth at least glossing over.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were both struck by how it was kind of amazing that you had this this British actor,
Scottish actor.
Scotland is part of Britain.
I know.
So by saying he's British,
I don't know if the Scots like that.
No, well, I mean they
I'm joking. I'm joking.
They don't like to be called English.
Oh, yeah,
they don't. You don't want to call them English.
No, you don't want to call them English.
But technically, Scots are British because you have the UK is comprised of the island of Great Britain and then the island of Ireland, but only there's two countries on the island of Ireland. There's the Republic of Ireland, and then there's Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom.
Well, we all come from Adam and Eve, so
yes,
I'm joking.
So yes. So anyway,
Ian McGregor, the British man that he is,
the British actor doing an American accent. We were both struck by almost how like normal it sounded, and it's not like Greg Laurie or Benedict Cumberbatch, whose American accents are like
gravelly and rawr.
It's like they're gargling nails or something.
Very much so. I mean, Benedict Cumberbatch specifically, I feel like he's gotten better through the years. But my God, he sounds so deep. He sounds like he's Smaug from The Hobbit the entire time of his filmography lately. But he's not as egregious as Greg Laurie. Not nearly as much as House.
Yeah, when you watch House, it's just like there's some parts where he's just like, blah, 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 and you're like, what? Like, what are you even saying?
What are you even saying? And it goes on for like, I don't know, 9 seasons. I don't know. But anyway, Ian McGregor does a pretty good job, I'd say here. Better than most British actors.
But that's really the interesting part of this movie is Ewan McGregor is such a great actor.
Yeah.
And he does a good job as an American accent because it sounds normal.
It sounds normal, yeah.
It doesn't necessarily sound, it's a little off-putting because it kind of doesn't really sound like him, but it sounds normal, like a normal American voice. And so he's actually putting effort.
Very convincing.
He's putting effort into this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And yet it seems like he's just phoning it in the whole time.
It seems like him, Naomi Watts' character, who's his girlfriend. I would even say Ryan Gosling. I know in Stuckman's analysis, he's like, I noticed Ryan Gosling's the only actor that gives it his all here. Sure, you could take that away, there's some parts where
a
lot
Ryan
of it
Gosling,
it's very much the same level as Ian McGregor.
Yeah.
Naomi, which goes to show that they were giving some stuff to this, but it has to do with what we are going to talk about. So yeah. So his accent is interesting, David, and it's very well done. Do you think is as good or better than Tom Holland's? Because Tom Holland's is like pretty natural, I would say.
I would say it's probably on par with Tom Holland because Tom Holland does in the Spider-Man films does very convincing, like American teenager sort of voice, even though he's not.
Yeah, I feel like it might just be because he's young, but I feel like sometimes it's a little too high, especially in like Spider-Man: Homecoming. It's a little too high for me.
Yeah, but
it
I mean,
kind of has the opposite effect of Benedict Cumberbatch.
There are certain times where it's because Tom Holland is older than his character is in the Spider-Man films. So there's some parts where he's trying too hard to come off as an adolescent.
Yeah,
but for the most part, he does a pretty good job. It's difficult to compare Tom Holland's performance in the Spider-Man movies with Ewan McGregor's performance in Stay, because Ewan McGregor's performance in Stay is so monotone and just like boring.
Yeah.
Whereas Tom Holland is very emotional in like pretty much every scene in the Spider-Man films that he's in. So it's totally different. So it's really kind of hard to compare their accents, like divorced from their performance, I would say. But I would say they're probably on par with each other.
Yeah, pretty talented. I also wrote in my notes, Bob Hoskins with an exclamation point. And that's it. And then I wrote down Ryan Gosling. Henry does mumble a lot in this film. He mumbles a lot. Like there was a point, and it might be our speaker system, but it shouldn't be. It's pretty good. Like where like I can barely understand what he's saying. Like, I'm like, what are you saying, Henry? What?
Yeah. To be fair, we have we have a
very interesting sound.
we have a very rumbly speakers, and also we had fans going on while the movie was playing.
Yeah.
So but he does mumble. And so it's probably not a fault of whoever was in charge of the mixing.
Mm-hmm.
If we were watching in a room that didn't have fans going and we had a less rumbly sound system, we probably wouldn't have had as much trouble understanding him during the mumbly parts as we did.
Did you just say we wouldn't have much trouble understanding him?
No, I didn't say that. But that
like in this movie, where he says treble.
Yeah,
that's treble,
but
not trouble. Treble.
That scene I do not understand at all.
It's so weird, and I don't get why BD Wong's even in this film. It makes no sense. Like Ian McGregor's going to him for advice. He does nothing. He doesn't give him any advice.
No, not at all.
There's no point to it.
It's like he doesn't even care.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't even care. Ewan McGregor tells this guy, I have a patient who said he's going to kill himself, and I believe him. And this guy's reaction is like, oh, another one, eh?
Yeah, I'm like, what?
It's just like,
I don't know what the point of this whole character and scene was. Like,
this is like, what? Oh yeah, we could bring him in, but it's not really going to do anything. Sorry. It's like, what?
It's like, oh my God. Let's talk about Ian McGregor's friggin' pants, man. Let's talk about his pants, man. So throughout the entire film, Ian McGregor probably has a pant size, I'm going to guess, 32 wide. And probably 28 length. This guy's got short pants. He's a taller guy.
Yeah,
I've seen him stand next to Qui-Gon Jinn. He's a tall man. Why are his pants so hiked up, David?
His pants go mid calf.
Mid calf.
Or no, sorry, mid calf.
Yeah, that's right. Man, calves. So it was very strange, very bizarre, very weird to see Ian McGregor. He needs some.
And he wasn't even wearing long socks.
No, he was wearing
it was just
short
like
socks.
Bare leg. bare Ewan McGregor leg on full display.
On full display. You want to see Ian McGregor's ankles? You got it in this film.
And it was very trippy too, because when he was standing, his pants went down to his shoes. But when he was sitting, where his pants should not have hiked up that much, they were hiked up fully showing his leg. It was like, what the heck?
He went full Count Olaf in this movie, man, where Count Olaf always makes sure that his ankle with that tattoo is displayed at all times. And Ian McGregor did the same thing. He's like, I'm going to make sure that I need air down there, man. That's what he wanted. He wanted air down there. But there's a reason for it. We're going to get into it.
Yeah.
And thus also blind Bob Hoskins is now Crystal Bob Hoskins. Oh, wait, no, I skipped ahead. Oh, sorry. Speaking of bare-leggedness, old lady and old man with Henry at a peep show. Also, 25 cents. Things were cheap in 2005.
Yeah, that seems, now that I think about it, that seems like kind of an anachronism. Because this movie, it came out in 2005, and all the technology and the aesthetic of it, as far as I'm concerned, it's set in the era that it came out in.
Very much so, from the clothing, from the clothing
and just everything.
Everything.
The design of the apartments that they're in and all this, it's it screams early 2005. It screams it. But it's very interesting that the strip club says 25 cents. It's like, I'm pretty sure in 2005 it was not a quarter to get into a strip club.
It's so weird. And he's there, he's the only person there at 3 a.m. in the morning. He's not the only person there.
There's two
people there. There's an old man and an old woman. And then the strippers are they're dancing and everything. I'm like, this place should be hopping by now, man. It's 3 a.m. Come on, guys. and you're still performing, go take a break. You okay?
Yeah, and then there's like
Like,
on the screen.
One guy came in. I guess we should go out there. It's
yeah.
like, okay.
And the old lady is Janine Garofalo, right?
I don't know. I guess so. Like,
I can't
I'm
remember.
not familiar with her.
She's in the movie somewhere. I can't remember. I can't remember how old Janine Garofalo is.
She was Dr. Beth Levy in the film.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Okay, so that's not. I think you're talking about. I don't know. I don't know who you're talking about. But yeah, it's this old lady.
Yeah, it's just some random old lady.
Some random old lady and a random old man. It was very
But yeah, it's so he's in this strip club that only costs 25 cents to get into. Yeah. There's two people in there.
It's like
and
2 a.m. in the morning.
They're hysterically laughing too, which is quite odd.
Yeah, and then you get the vision that Henry has on the main display of the peep show.
Projector there's a projector projecting images on the back wall behind the dancers, and it's like images of his childhood.
Yeah, and family photos. And he's like crying and breaking down by watching this. And it's like, I mean, I would probably too. That would be very disturbing.
I don't know if I'd cry and break down, but
I'd walk out.
Yeah.
I don't know why I would even be there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be there in the first place. But if I were in a mindset to go and enjoy some erotic dancing for some reason, I would probably be very put off by displays of family photos during the dance.
During the dance, yeah. So that scene was very, very interesting indeed. So yeah. Anyway, okay. So David, let's just go straight to the end. Straight to the end of this film. You see Naomi Watts walking down the stairs, and you happen to notice as she's trying to open the downstairs door to her apartment that there's a tire and a headlight broken on the bottom at the bottom of the stairs where she's trying to get in. And then it cuts to Ian McGregor and Ryan Gosling. Ian McGregor finally tracked down Henry, and he's basically convinced him, "Don't kill yourself, Henry. It's not worth it." And then he's like, no, this isn't real. You're not real. Nothing in this is real, or something to that extent.
No. He said, Ewan McGregor, says, "You remember how you said you didn't know what was real?" And then he's like, because through this movie, Ewan McGregor's character starts having some mental breakdowns too.
Yeah.
And you're like, what's going on here? And yeah, Ewan McGregor's like, "You said this." Well, it's like, guess what? Now I don't know what's real. And Ryan Gosling's character says to him, "You are." So it's very interesting. He says, he answers that question by saying, "You are."
Yeah, it's and then Henry then proceeds to, and there's very weird, while this is all happening, there's very weird effects happening in the background on the bridge they're on. And it's like ethereal, wispy special effects that are happening that look really good, by the way, for especially 05, I would say. Like, they look great. And like even today they look fine. And then like it's all this, like it's like an ending of a dream that's happening. And then he has the gun, he puts it in his mouth, fires it, and then it cuts to a bunch of different things. It shows the opening of the film where Henry's sitting next to a car on fire on the bridge. And then it shows a bunch of other stuff. And then it cuts to Henry's POV looking up, and it's Ian McGregor shining a light in his eyes. And David, I want you to explain what happens next.
So basically, this is where the tone of the movie changes completely. Ryan Gosling is on the ground, he's bleeding, and at first you're like, oh, because he just literally shot himself in the head. But what's interesting is he's not bleeding because he puts the gun in his mouth, but he's bleeding like from somewhere else on his head. So it's kind of interesting, but but you're just like, oh, he shot himself. He's on the ground, and Ewan McGregor is like trying to keep him alive while the ambulance comes. But then certain things start happening where it doesn't add up. You see a character from before who was Ewan McGregor's old girlfriend. She's
talking to the cops or something.
She's talking to him. She's talking to him. She's on the bridge.
Oh, yeah.
And she's talking to him, and she's like, I was the first one on the scene. I know you're not supposed to move him, but I was the first one here. And you're like, but wait a second. She wasn't the first one here. And then what's her face? Naomi Watts' character comes as well, which is very interesting because she shows up even though in a previous scene right before, you see she has this realization because she looks at all the names on all the backs of the paintings that's in her apartment, and that it's all has Henry Lethem written on them. So they're Ryan Gosling's character's paintings, and she has this sudden realization. So she tries to leave, but the gate to her stairwell is locked and she can't get out. But then she shows up anyway.
Yeah. And
they're both like over the top of Ewan McGregor, and Naomi Watts are both over the top of Ryan Gosling. Like, come on, stay together. But then he starts talking about like, I'm a doctor, and like Ewan McGregor's like, I'm a doctor, I'm gonna take care of you. And she mentions being like a nurse or something, and then he's like, oh, I'm gonna search your pockets, okay? Is like, I gotta find something some ID.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, what's going on here?
Yeah. So he proceeds to pull out his wallet, and you start hearing a lot of people gathering around him, and you hear quotes of people saying some things that you heard earlier in the film from other people, or even the same people, because as we notice, as he's pulling the wallet out and opens it up, a wedding ring falls out. And it's the wedding ring that Henry has had throughout the whole film, who he wanted to give it to this lady named Athena. He said he met once at a diner, who worked at a diner, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to die. I'm going to kill myself. I'd rather just give it to her and be gone. And out falls the wedding ring. You're like, oh, that's interesting. And then you see all these people come up behind Ewan McGregor and Naomi Watts, and they start talking, and they're like, yeah, he ain't going to make it. Like, mommy, is everybody going to die? And all these things we've seen earlier in the film. You're like, wait, what? What's going on here? These are people we've seen.
Yeah, it turns out they're the same people.
And he gives, and then he finds out he's Henry, but he should already know he's Henry. What? And so at this point, you're like, okay, I think I know what's going on. And also, the movie opens with a car accident scene. It starts with the wheel of a car driving, and then it bursts apart, and then it goes kind of into a more POV perspective of the car, of whoever's driving it, and it crashes, and it tumbles over. And then the opening of the movie then proceeds to include a scene where Henry is kneeling next to maybe the said car, and then gets up and walks away. But now we are in that same place, but Henry's on the ground bleeding, surrounded by these people we've already established were his psychiatrist and psychiatrist's girlfriend, maybe, as well as all these other people. So it seems like what we've noticed, what we've been watching this whole movie, has been a dream sequence from Henry. In fact, Henry starts saying over and over, forgive me, forgive me, forgive me, which was what was written on the walls in that one room in that scene with B.D. Wong.
Yeah, and you notice too that like through the whole movie, Henry's talking about how his parents are dead, but then he mistakes one guy for his father.
Yeah.
And Ewan McGregor has an encounter with a supposed encounter with Henry's mother, even though she's supposed to be dead. And like, that scene is very interesting because you come away from that scene thinking the dog bite was the only real thing because he's being treated for it.
Yeah.
When the cop comes in and tells him that, this lady's been dead for years
yeah.
And the house is empty. But you still think the dog bite is real because he's actually being treated for it by a nurse. But then he talks to Ryan Gosling's character about the dog, and Ryan Gosling's character is like, we put down Olive years ago.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's very trippy. It's like you come off thinking this one thing's real, and then it turns out not even that's real.
Yeah, it's like what? Okay, so and then you realize before I believe after Henry shoots the gun, you get the full scene of the car crash. You see from somebody's perspective in the driver's seat, assumingly Henry's. At the time, you don't know who it is, but you see Athena, you see her character. You also look in the mirror, and it's Bob Hoskins and the lady who plays the wife. You're like, oh, they're alive. Whoa. Okay. And then the car crash happens.
Yep.
So this was all a car crash. Henry's lying, dying on the ground, fading away. And he's starting to hallucinate. He says it's hailing because he sees all these lights and fixtures and all these images in his mind. And earlier in the film, he just says the same thing, of course, and then it hails. So all these little things throughout all this entire film, it's all meant to not coagulate, that's not the right word, to culminate into this car crash. And this whole movie has been Henry's vision and him looking back on his life and probably his life flashing before his eyes. And his life is filled, and in these scenes that he has lived, they're filled with people that he has seen in front of him as he's laying there dying, which includes Ian McGregor's character, Naomi Watts, the old man in the background, the Shakespeare instructor, a ton of different people. And so we kind of also find out as he's laying dying there, you come to the conclusion that Ian McGregor in a lot of the scenes was actually Henry. Because I think I don't know about the scene with the mother, but definitely the scene where he's talking to Athena in the play, I would assume that would be Henry talking to her and kind of catching her up after her practice, for example, is what I would assume.
Perhaps.
And there's other examples as well, but what do you think, David?
My sort of view is that because a lot of the movie is Ewan McGregor character tracking down all these people from Ryan Gosling character's life, and what I think is happening is it's not that Ewan McGregor is Henry, but that the manifestation of the doctor who's treating him as he's dying from the car crash is sort of guiding him through the process of like coming to grips with all the people he's going to lose as he lays there dying.
Yeah, and I think Naomi Watts' character is supposed to embody his art side, his creative side of things, which is really interesting because I know specifically when I dream, there's like a side of like past experiences or experiences I'm experiencing that I haven't yet or that I probably never will. But as well, there's a creative side to it too, which is really really cool because like there's a creative side where like, oh, I'm going through this tunnel. Well, why would I figure I'm going through a tunnel? Well, that's weird because I've never been through this like tunnel, like, like for example, I had a dream like I was clawing through a tunnel in like Coraline style, and I handed up on the other side of the way and to a new place. And I'm like, your brain does weird things and is weird how it handles things and portrays it and gives it to you, delivers it to you. And that's part of creativity. And that's part of the reason why on our podcast, we kind of talk about creativity and kind of want to foster it and your imagination and to not let it get weak and to keep it exercised, basically, is what I would say. So it's interesting how Naomi Watts' character is that creative embodiment of him. And Ian McGregor is kind of, the image of this doctor who's taking care of him, but also is somebody who is in the embodiment of him working through his thoughts and working through his life. Because it seems like Henry had a pretty happy life, actually, outside of this dream sequence. I think it's just him him dying, realizing, oh my God, there's so much I could have done and I could have been doing instead. But I think like his mom and dad seem pretty happy. They're alive. His girlfriend seems happy. Like they obviously just got done with dinner or something and they're heading home. And it seems like his life's turning all around from maybe the dark places he was in. And now the car crash happens.
Mm-hmm.
And he keeps saying, forgive me. Like he caused it. He didn't. And I guess there's a theory that he did cause it, but there's plenty of evidence to say, no, that's not what happened. This is just completely by accident.
Yeah.
He didn't have any malintentions. In fact, I kind of want to dive into this scene next, David. The scene where he goes to Bob Hoskins' character, who is blind, and he restores his sight. Kind of want to dive into that and what you think of that.
Yeah, that scene was very
probably the most out of place scene I would say of the whole film.
Yeah, that scene made me scratch my head. Is like, are we like what exactly are we seeing here? Because it's like it kind of sort of alludes to it in the beginning where Ryan Gosling's character is like, I want to get out of here before the hail starts. And then it starts hailing, and Ewan McGregor's character is like, whoa, he predicted the hail. And everybody else is like completely nonplussed. Yeah. Like they're just like,
whatever.
That's not the right word. Nonplus. Why did I say nonplussed?
What's nonplus?
That's like, my brain just shut off.
That's fine. I'll look it up.
Unimpressed.
Unimpressed.
Unimpressed was the word I meant to say. Why did I say nonplussed? But anyway.
Oh no, I typed in non-pus instead of plus.
Oh gosh.
God. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. So, but his girlfriend's just like completely unimpressed. Was like, it's like whatever. That's dumb. Why are you impressed by that kind of a thing? And so, but then. So it's kind of like a little taste of it, but then he like straight up makes a blind man see. It's like, what?
Yeah, wait, what? What is this supposed to mean? And I guess you could translate it to he wants his father to be proud of him or something, and he wants him to see him for who he really is and appreciate for who he really is, and he never got that chance to do that. So maybe this is his brain just processing that and imagining a scenario where he does have his father realize who he is for who he truly is, and appreciate him for who he is.
And this is where it gets into the like, does the director actually have a really clear vision of this? I
feel like because that whole scene could have been taken out, because you didn't have to have Bob Hoskins after that go to Ian McGregor and say, "Oh, it's all great, it's I can see. Oh my God, you didn't need to have that in there."
Yeah, so that's the takeaway of the whole like wanting his father to see him. That's the takeaway of that Stuckman guy.
Yeah.
But
it makes sense.
It makes sense. It makes sense. But also that scene in general muddles the whole movie.
It muddles it really.
It's like it just makes it really weird.
It's out of place for sure.
So like I'm wondering if the director really knew what he was doing with that scene, because everything else is a lot like all the other manifestations of like people from Henry's life are a lot more clear.
Oh yeah.
Like, cause it's almost like, Sam, the psychiatrist, is a manifestation of the doctor who's treating him, guiding him through all the people he's going to lose as he's dying. And he's coming to grips with that. It's almost like, Henry is Dante and Sam is his Virgil guiding him through the experience. Because for those who don't know, Dante's Inferno is basically hell fan fiction.
Yeah.
Dante inserts himself into the story, and he's being guided through hell by the Roman poet Virgil, who would have been long dead, who is long dead to us, and so is Dante, but who would have been long dead to Dante at the time of the writing. So I think Sam's character is kind of like a Virgil in a sense, where he's guiding Henry through like this whole
Like
process.
your regrets, your wantings, your desires.
Yeah, as his brain is shutting down, as he's dying, the manifestation of this doctor who's treating him out on the street and trying to keep him alive is guiding him through all these people in his life, one by one. So that makes a whole lot of sense, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him to go to his father and like physically heal his eyesight.
Yeah, also, it's weird, the whole scene on the train with the old guy saying, you better put out that effing cigarette. Like, that's a weird thing, too, because it's another scene where Henry's alone, and he's not, kind of like the father scene. And it's, like, supposed to, I guess, entail that he has suicidal thoughts and he doesn't feel pain anymore, I guess. But you don't really need that scene in there. It kind of doesn't add anything to the movie, really.
Yeah. Well, it definitely establishes that something is up with his character and that he burns himself with a cigarette.
Yeah.
But it's really weird how it's presented, because it's presented as like something completely unnatural. Like he just does it and has literally no reaction to being burned by a cigarette on his arm.
Yeah.
And the dude who is telling him to put out the cigarette is visibly appalled by it and is like, you're a weirdo, and runs away. But then he's talking to Sam, the psychiatrist, later, and it's just like, oh yeah, I burned myself with cigarettes. Like, that's a person, like, as he's presenting it as like he's hurting himself.
Yeah, and you didn't, because that right there established it. You don't really need that scene. I guess it's a way of Henry contemplating suicide. Maybe he did consider at one point, or I feel like the suicide whole angle of this film kind of just results in his character wanting to not stay in limbo or whatever we're looking at, I think. Because it's interesting, because it's like we're not in limbo. I think it's kind of like Dante's Inferno, I guess, to a certain extent in that way, where Ewan is helping him along. But also there's weird scenes where like Henry's alone, like when he's watching Athena dance, which I understand, but also there's a lot of scenes with Ewan's alone, but it progresses the story and gives us more context to Henry's character. There's a purpose for each time Ewan is on the screen. Versus when Henry's just alone, some of the scenes are kind of just, I feel like they could have been taken out and they didn't add any a whole lot of substance, with the exception of, I'd say, the Athena dance, because that's him longing to finally be with her and marry her like he was going to do with his wallet in that he had in the car. Like he had the ring, he was obviously going to propose to her, maybe even that night, we don't know. Maybe with his parents present, but it's just, I feel like there's a lot of things that could have helped this movie out, and I was just trying to think of something that could help it, and I think taking away some scenes, for example, might do it, and I think also maybe adding in some stuff like more of Naomi Watts' character, maybe having a heart-to-heart with Henry or something like that, like screw the protocols of doctors or anything. I feel like that's just a kind of a cop-out.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, is that they bring that up in the movie.
Yeah, they bring it up.
And then say, no, we can't do that.
Yeah, it's weird.
So, yeah. But I feel like
as
I feel like that would have given Ewan McGregor's character and Naomi Watts' character kind of equal footing in the story, because they're both
equal.
They're both there.
We're both there
as he's dying from the car crash, and they're both like trying to, keep him alive, keep him awake until the ambulance comes. And like it's very, very, it's a very pivotal moment too, because that's how they get together in real life, is bonding over the shared traumatic experience that they just had.
And her character serves the role of being Athena because he's hallucinating and he thinks she's Athena. And so he says, will you marry me? And, obviously Naomi Watts' character, she knows what's going on. She's like, well, yes, I will, obviously. This guy is dying.
Yeah.
So, and then it establishes, like something came out of this. Like now this guy and this gal are going to go have some coffee and maybe have a relationship later on. And then who knows? So I don't know. I just feel like this film's it's fascinating to me. It's interesting. I don't think there's anything really out there like it. That if it is, I think there's a lot of more things that are far more pretentious. I feel like there could have, and this is a movie that's almost 20 years old, so it's funny how we're talking about like how we could improve it. But on its own basis and its own merits, I think it's an interesting watch, and I think I'd recommend it because it makes you think.
Yeah, it's definitely worth watching. It's not nearly as amazingly well put together as Shutter Island is, but it's not pretentious.
Yeah, and
it's
also
definitely worth a watch.
And I would say the directing's fine and good. I think there's lots of wonderful, really interesting cuts and things that communicate to you like what this film's trying to communicate to you. And I feel like it's handled in a really good way. A lot of the transitions are really cool, like with the hand on this bridge.
Oh, yeah.
And then it goes to the chess piece, and you're like, oh, okay. Or like Ian McGregor and Ryan Gosling, there's so many times when they are basically swapped or put in the same position in any shot.
Oh, yeah.
Insinuating maybe they're the same people.
Yeah, when they're having the little tussle.
Mm-hmm. It like cuts, and then boom, they're swapped places.
And they're like both saying the same thing at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's like Henry is like saying Sam's dialogue for him kind of a thing, but they're both saying it at the same time. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, that still blows my mind after watching that Stuckman video with all the reviews, the negative reviews that it got. Like, there's a lot of movies that you could call like artsy fartsy trash. This is not what I would call artsy fartsy in the slightest.
No.
It's a very weird movie. It's not a typical movie. And yeah, there's certainly things that could be improved. And there is a question of how clear the director's vision was overall. But by no means is it some kind of pretentious artsy fartsy trash. That's so weird that's the impression that people got of it.
Yeah, it's weird that's the takeaway people had, because I think, and especially with the actors too and what they're trying to do, I don't know, it's weird. Some people just, different strokes for different folks, I guess,
I guess what's that saying? There's no accounting for taste. I probably butchered that, but
But I think what you brought up, David, non-plus, is the actual probably definition I would use for this film. Like, to put, it says here, transition the verb, to put at a loss as to what to think, say, or do, bewilder. Also usage, you could, feel indifferent or bored, I guess, as well. But non-plus, I think, would be adequate because this film does bewilder me to a certain extent. Also, I want to say something to the audience. David doesn't know what blind people look like.
What?
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So like in the part that we talked about where Henry is putting his hands on the doctor's face, Bob Hoskins' character's face, because the Bob Hoskins character is blind, which has already been established earlier in the film, David. And then he makes him see again. And then David's like, oh, he was blind?
No. Okay. Let me explain. So,
oh my gosh.
I was kind of tired that night, and I don't think I was paying attention during that part, because you immediately, as soon as he was on screen, you're like, oh, it's Bob Hoskins, and I was like, oh, it kind of like took me by surprise, and then I was like, wait, who's Bob Hoskins? And then you started listing off movies and shows that he was in, and then I was like, oh yeah. Oh, that guy. So my mind was kind of on like other stuff that Bob Hoskins was in at that moment. So I don't think I was fully paying attention during that part. I think that's why I didn't catch it.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I think I was thinking about him as Smee from Hook, to be honest.
But you didn't notice his cane or anything?
No, I didn't notice it.
You didn't?
Like I said, I wasn't really paying attention during that part.
Okay.
My mind was
What about in the apartment where he's about to make him see and he's fumbling around and he's like looking into blank space?
Well, that's where I was starting to, that's where it hit me that he was blind. And then, but I didn't actually say anything until he literally restored his sight.
Okay.
So that's when I decided to say, oh, he's blind. But yeah, when he's fumbling around in the apartment, that's when I was like, oh, that's when the thought hit me is like, oh, wait, he can't see. But the scene where the earlier scene that they're in where Bob Hoskins and Ewan McGregor are playing chess, and then Ryan Gosling comes in and freaks out. Mm-hmm. And Bob Hoskins is like, okay, I'm getting out of here. Mm. And then, Ryan Gosling starts talking about how that's his dad. Mm. That scene is where I was not really paying attention, and I did not notice that he was blind.
Okay, yeah.
But no, when he starts feeling around, like it's like, what? Why are you here? What? You need to leave. You can't just go barging into people's houses like that. And he's like
feeling around.
Yeah, that's when I was like, oh, okay, he's blind.
It threw me so off guard. Like I didn't know David was unaware of the earlier scene because like it happened and he's like, oh, he's blind. I'm like, what? What? Yes, he's blind. I don't know.
Yeah, but the moment where he restored his sight, that's when I chose to vocalize my surprise that he was blind. Okay. Because, but I got that he was blind from when he was fumbling around. The part that I wasn't paying attention to was the chess scene.
Okay, gotcha.
Because you don't actually see him again. Like
until later,
that scene, you see him in the chess scene, and then you see him when Ryan Gosling goes to visit him.
Yeah.
So
I think it's interesting how these two films kind of correlated in a way, unintentionally at all. Like you picked Shutter Island, I picked Stay. I'm like, oh yeah, those films got like twists in them and they're kind of creepy, so they're thrillers. So let's go ahead and let's watch them both. And it's weird how they both deal with mental health and how they portray mental health. And it's interesting to me because one has to do with an insane asylum and the extremities of that, of people breaking or on the brink of breaking. And then you have Stay as well, which also portrays somebody who's on the brink of breaking or has already been broken in a way.
Yeah. What's interesting too is they're both movies where like, and we're still on spoilers, just to be sure.
Yeah, we're still on spoilers.
We're still on spoilers. Yeah, they're both movies where what you think is real at first is actually happening in one of the characters' heads.
Yeah. And it's such, like, we did not plan that at all. Like, we were like, oh, let's just pick two films, and they're both thrillers, sounds good. And they just have quite similar themes, and I was very surprised for that revelation to hit me. I wasn't expecting it at all. So, any final words, David, about Stay or even Shutter Island and what you would recommend or not recommend for people? I mean, Shutter Island's an easy recommend.
Yeah, Shutter Island's easy recommendation.
If you're queasy, maybe not.
Yeah, if you don't like intensity, like if really intense scenes of violence and death bother you, then you should probably stay away from it.
Yeah.
But if you're not bothered by that, easy recommendation. Watch it. Such a great movie. Stay, I think, is not for the faint of heart. It's worth a watch, but I think it's not for the faint of heart. You need to devote some space to it. Yes. Like you need to actually be able to sit down and pay attention to the movie, because if you don't, you're not going to get anything out of it.
No.
Because this is a movie that is actively hostile to its viewers. It does things in ways that it almost seems like it wants to push you away.
Yeah.
Like the acting and the dreariness of everything is like, what? and then you have those weird scenes that don't really add anything to the film. So if you're not coming into this like with a mind to actually pay attention to the movie and devote the time to watching it and to actually taking it in, you're just going to get put off by it. But if you are looking for a movie where you can sort of grapple with it, then I would definitely recommend it.
And I think that's an interesting thing because I think a lot of times in the media we consume as in our society, a lot of it is, consumable and you throw it away. Or it's in a wrapper, you take it out and you're done with it, But I think with Stay, it's funny how it's called Stay because it kind of does stay with you, where it makes you think, it makes you put effort into what you're viewing, and it requires, like you said, space to consume it, to analyze it, to really think about it, and it makes you work for what it has in store for you. So I would recommend it, only if you're willing to do that, and it's not an easy recommend for sure. And it makes me think, like, what did the studio, what did the director, what did the writer see in this film that made it, or what did the executives, I should say, see in this film to greenlight it?
Yeah, that's really the interesting part.
If it's such a hostile movie, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we said could be taken out feels like it might have been added in, but it's something that would not have been added in on second hand. It feels like, I mean, I want to know who greenlit it. It's 20th Century Fox, and I don't know. Well, it's interesting to me. I don't know. It boggles my mind because, again, this is 2005. Not
Do
everything
we know the
was
budget of the movie.
I do not. I can look that up real quick, but I can't imagine it was that much. It was probably like, I mean, let me look that up real quick.
Because that's kind of what I'm wondering is, I wonder if they greenlit it simply because it was such a low budget movie that they're like, yeah, we can take a chance on this.
So the budget of the film, I get the grosses. It made $3 million. It made $8 million worldwide, said and done. But I'm not seeing any details about the budget at all.
Yeah, because if the budget was low enough, then they would have made their money back. Yeah, if the budget was low enough. So maybe the budget was so low.
What if they had $5 million or something? And
yeah, so what if the budget was so low that they're just like, oh, we could just take a chance on this, and even if it bombs, we'll at least make something from it.
And you also have DVD sales, of course, at that time, as well as Blu-ray coming onto the scene. So you had the physical media market, of course. And this is with a lot of films. They're in theaters. Maybe they're not a hit, but they're maybe a hit on the secondhand market or in the physical market or in the DVD Blu-ray market. That's how a lot of movies got their money back, in fact, if they weren't successful in theaters. And it's weird to kind of look at the industry now where that's not the case at all and people are moving to just streaming, I mean, to get your film on streaming, if they're going to pay you something, they're going to pay you what it's worth, which means they're going off of how much it made in theaters to get it on their platform. But if it wasn't successful in theaters, how are they're not going to pay you that much to get it onto the streaming platform. Versus if we just had, say, a form to just purchase it by ourselves, whether it be physical or even digital, then they could possibly make more money. But that's not the time we live in anymore. And it's interesting to see. It's kind of like what we brought up, I think, a few episodes ago about Hollywood and them not being able to bring back revenue in that way anymore. It's all streaming. It's all, in a way, a miscalculation of a lot of different companies. And it seems like it might be a detriment. It is a detriment to the industry, I would say. But yeah, makes you think with you. So
it does stick with you for
also,
sure.
what does it mean? What do they mean by stay, David? What's your theory on that? Closing this out.
I almost think that stay is referring to him staying in the land of the living. Like he's trying to stay alive, but his brain is shutting down, and so he's like this whole I think it's him just coming to grips with his life and all the people he's losing, and he's just trying to stay in this place for as long as he can before it's all over. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah. It's interesting. But Shutter Island, man, that's a good movie. What's his name? Oh my God, not Atrocity. Socrates. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh my God, Socrates.
I had a brain fart there. I'm like, oh my God, Socrates. So, yeah, that was
so good.
That was a very memorable watch for sure. Yeah. And I'd say Stay is it might stick with you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you've enjoyed your time listening to us ramble on about these two movies. We hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening, and Snarp Fangle on.
Oh my God, Socrates! Ah!